What would you do if your coworker was stealing your ideas and your snacks? Sarah Wheeler, a 35-year-old marketing executive, thought she had everything under control until she realized someone in her office had been stealing her snacks. But that wasn't the only problem. Her arrogant coworker, Chad, had been taking credit for her hard work. This time, she wasn't going to just let it slide. Stay tuned to see how Sarah handles the office drama, and don't forget to subscribe for more workplace tales. Now, let me set the scene for you. I'm 35 years old, living what I thought would be my best life, or maybe my busiest as a marketing executive in the heart of Norfolk. My days are a whirlwind of pitch meetings, late nights at the office, and way too much coffee. Sarah, you're going to burn out if you keep this up, my coworker Ashley says, glancing at the clock as she watches me finish yet another presentation for a big client. I shrug, not taking my eyes off the screen. I can't help it. The Hendrick account is driving me crazy. Ashley smirks. Speaking of crazy, where's that trail mix you always keep in your drawer? I pause, my eyes scanning my desk and then the empty drawer, and a sudden realization hits. Gone? I frown, muttering to myself. I swear, Ashley, I'm not losing my mind. Someone's been stealing my snacks. Ashley laughs. I'd bet you $5 it's Chad, she whispers, nodding toward the cubicle next to mine. Ah, Chad Swift, the office charmer. He's got a smile so smooth he could probably sell ice to an Eskimo. Too bad that smile hides who he really is. Did you actually see him near my desk? I narrow my eyes, already suspecting the worst. Not exactly, but come on, he's always mooching off people, whether it's their ideas, their work, or apparently their food. Why not your snacks too? Ashley leans back, clearly entertained by the thought. I sigh, rubbing my temples. I can't just accuse him without proof. HR would have a field day. Then get proof, Ashley suggests, her eyes lighting up with mischief. Before I can respond, my phone buzzes, cutting the tension. It's my sister Megan. Sarah, emergency! The florist just canceled! Her panicked voice echoes through the phone. Wedding drama, just what I needed on top of everything else. I groan, feeling the weight of the day settling in. Take a deep breath, Megan. We'll figure it out, I say, trying to calm her down, but I can already feel the stress mounting. After hanging up, I slump back in my chair. My to-do list just grew by a mile. Suddenly, Chad strolls over with that cocky grin of his. Ladies, working hard or hardly working? He jokes, completely unfazed by the tension in the air. I resist the urge to roll my eyes. What do you need, Chad? Just wondering if you have those projections for the Morton account. Team meetings in 10 minutes. My blood boils. Those were my projections, and he clearly procrastinated on his part of the work. But I keep my cool. Sure, Chad, I'll email them over, I say, teeth clenched. As he walks away, Ashley leans in, whispering, See? Total freeloader. I sigh, massaging my temples. Office life. It's always something, isn't it? Whether it's wedding chaos, snack thieves, or coworkers like Chad, there's never a dull moment. An idea starts to form in my head. Maybe it's time to take matters into my own hands. The rest of the day passes in a blur, filled with meetings, last-minute tasks, and putting out fires. By the time I'm packing up to leave, I catch Chad hovering near my desk, his eyes darting toward my drawer. Night, Sarah. Don't work too hard, he says, all innocence, flashing me his signature grin. I force a polite smile. Night, Chad. As soon as he's gone, I turn to Ashley. Okay, Operation Snack Thief is officially on. Ashley's face lights up. Finally, let's do this. We start setting up the trap. I feel a mix of excitement and nervousness as we work. This was more than just catching a snack thief. It was about principle. Build? I know this was the start of a workplace showdown that would change everything. The next morning, I walk into the office with a plan ready to go. My secret weapon, a fake lottery ticket tucked inside my lunch bag. If Chad really was the snack thief, this would lure him in. Morning, Sarah. You're looking awfully cheerful today, Ashley says as I pass her desk, raising an eyebrow. Oh, just feeling lucky, I reply with a wink, patting my bag. I settle into my desk, double-checking that my hidden camera pin is perfectly positioned. The stage was set. It doesn't take long for Chad to make his move. He strolls over, coffee in hand, his usual confident grin plastered across his face. "Hey, Sarah, got any of those amazing homemade cookies today?" I smile, playing along. "Sorry, Chad, not today, but I do have a pretty awesome lunch planned." He looks a little disappointed, but I see a spark in his eye. Hook, line, and sinker. As the morning drags on, I keep one eye on my bag and the other on my work. Any moment now. Suddenly, my phone buzzes. It's Amber, my boss. "Sarah, can you come to my office now?" My heart skips a beat. What could this be about? I take a deep breath and head over. Amber sits behind her desk, her usual stern expression in place. This was serious. "Close the door, Sarah," she says. I sit down, palms sweating. "What's going on, Amber?" "We're looking at promoting someone to lead the new digital marketing division," she begins. "Your name is on the list." I almost choke. "Seriously? Wow." Amber holds up a hand. "Don't celebrate just yet. Chad is also being considered, of course." Of course he is. I bite my tongue to stop a groan from escaping. "The decision will be based on your performance over the next few weeks. Keep this between us," Amber says firmly. I nod, my mind racing. Great, now I've got to catch a snack thief and outshine Chad for a promotion. "Got it," I reply, determination flooding my veins. This was no longer just about catching a petty thief. It was a challenge, one that would push me to prove my worth. The game was on. As I walk away from Amber's office, my thoughts are already locked onto the next step. This promotion had just become even more crucial. Walking back to my desk, I spot Chad loitering nearby, pretending to be busy. Time to put my plan into action. I grab my phone and pull off my best urgent call routine. "Hello? Yes, this is Sarah Wheeler." "Oh no, really? Okay, I'll be right there." I rush out of the office, leaving my lunch bag in plain sight. From the corner of the hallway, I watch Chad's every move. He glances around, his eyes darting nervously. Then, like he's just walking by, he casually approaches my desk. And just as I'd hoped, he starts rummaging through my bag. My heart pounds in my chest, but I stay perfectly still, holding my breath. Then, I see it. His eyes widen. Bingo! He's found the fake lottery ticket. In a swift motion, he pockets it, glancing around to make sure no one's watching before walking away. I let out a silent breath. Perfect. The bait worked. I return to my desk, acting like nothing happened. Ashley catches my eye, leaning in. "Did it work?" she whispers. I nod, my grin wide. The plan was unfolding exactly how I wanted. The rest of the day, I keep a close eye on Chad. He's acting jittery, checking his phone every few minutes like he's waiting for something. During the afternoon meeting, his distracted behavior is impossible to ignore. "Earth to Chad," Kevin jokes from across the table. "What's up? You in the lottery or something?" Chad laughs, but it's forced, his face turning an awkward shade of red. "What? No, just, thinking about a big account." "Yeah, right," I think, hiding a smirk behind my notebook. He's not fooling anyone, at least not me. As the day drags on, the office gossip starts to spiral. Marilyn from accounting rushes over, her face tight with worry. "Did you hear?" she whispers, eyes darting around. "They're saying Wheeler's account is pulling out. There might be layoffs." My stomach drops. Wheeler's account is one of our largest clients. If the rumors are true, the stakes for this promotion just shot through the roof. I force my voice to stay steady. "Are you sure? That's a massive account." Marilyn nods grimly. "Straight from finance. Things are about to get messy." As I finish up my work, packing my things, Chad approaches. He's practically bouncing with excitement, trying to act casual but failing miserably. "Hey, Sarah," he says with a grin. "Crazy day, huh? Listen, I was thinking maybe we could grab a drink sometime, talk about the future, big plans and all." I resist the urge to roll my eyes. "Thanks, Chad, but I'm swamped with this new project. Maybe another time." He nods eagerly, the grin still plastered on his face. Sure, no rush. We've got all the time in the world, right?" I smile politely, but my thoughts are elsewhere. If only you knew, Chad. Things are about to get very interesting. I felt a mix of satisfaction and nervousness. The trap was set, but now the stakes were much higher. Between the promotion and the rumors about layoffs, everything felt like it was hanging by a thread. Over the next few days, Chad started acting like he had already hit the jackpot. Well, in his mind, he had. He strutted around the office with a new kind of confidence, whispering to anyone who would listen. "Sarah," Ashley hissed from her desk one afternoon, "what's Chad telling Kevin over there?" I leaned in, trying to catch what he was saying. His voice carried just enough for me to hear him say, "Just waiting for the funds to clear, then I'm out of here. Thinking maybe I could." I couldn't believe my ears. "Unbelievable," I muttered to Ashley. "He's planning vacations while the rest of us are worrying about losing our jobs." "Speaking of which," Ashley added, "have you noticed how empty his desk has been? He hasn't barely been around." That gave me an idea. I quickly typed up an anonymous email to HR detailing Chad's frequent absences. I didn't want to come off as vindictive. It was just time for someone to take notice of his behavior. Later that day, we all gathered for an important presentation to save the Wheeler account, one of our biggest clients. The tension in the room was thick. Chad swaggered in late, looking disheveled and completely unprepared. "All right, Chad, show us what you've got," Amber said, raising an eyebrow. Chad shuffled his notes and started fumbling through his words. Yes, the Wheeler account. So, we're going to increase engagement by..." His voice trailed off as he stared blankly at his papers. The clients exchanged worried glances. I knew I had to step in. "Perhaps we should take a short break," I said smoothly. "I have some additional materials that might interest everyone." As the group left the room, I grabbed Chad's arm. "What the hell, Chad? This is our biggest account. Are you even trying?" He shrugged me off, smirking. "Relax, Sarah. None of this matters anymore. I've got bigger fish to fry." I was fuming, but there was no time to argue. When we reconvened, I took charge of the presentation. I gave it everything I had: clear slides, strong data, and a compelling vision for the account's future. By the end, the clients were nodding enthusiastically, and Amber's expression softened into approval. "Excellent work, Sarah," she said. Then she turned to Chad. "Chad, a word in my office, please." As they left, Kevin approached me looking embarrassed. "Hey, Sarah, this is kind of awkward, but could I borrow $1,800? Chad promised to pay me back double once his big windfall comes through." I stared at him speechless for a moment. Chad's lies were spreading fast, but now the truth was unraveling even faster. This was far from over. I stare at Kevin completely stunned. "Wait, how much did you give him?" He shifts uncomfortably, avoiding my eyes. "About $2,000, he mutters. "But it's fine. He showed me the ticket and everything." My heart sinks. This has gone way too far. I try to stay calm, but inside I'm boiling. Chad's lies are dragging everyone down with him. Later, as I'm organizing files for the Wheeler account, I notice something strange. The strategies and ideas in the files. They're mine. Every single one of them, but they've all been signed off by Chad. "What a sneaky little thief," I mutter under my breath. I dig deeper, finding email after email where he's taken credit for my work. This wasn't just about snacks or a fake lottery ticket anymore. Chad had been stealing my ideas all along. Furious, I begin copying everything into a separate folder, my hands moving quickly but deliberately. As I finish, the door bursts open and Chad storms in, panic written all over his face. "Sarah, I need to borrow some cash. It's an emergency." I cross my arms and give him a hard look, not budging an inch. "What kind of emergency, Chad?" He glances around the room, lowers his voice, and leans in close like he's about to reveal some grand secret. "Look, I can't say too much, but let's just say I'm about to come into a lot of money. I just need a little to tide me over. I'll pay you back triple, I swear." I shake my head, disgust flooding my chest. "Sorry, Chad, I'm not a bank, and I don't hand out loans." His face twists, frustration flashing across his features as he storms out, muttering under his breath. I turn back to my computer, my resolve hardening. Enough is enough. Chad's lies, his theft, his freeloading, it all ends here. I start gathering everything: the emails where he stole my ideas, the records of his absences, testimonies from coworkers who had lent him money. Piece by piece, I build a solid case. Chad's house of cards is about to collapse, and I'm going to be the one to push it over. The next day, the office buzzes with chatter as Chad walks in like he owns the place. He's wearing a suit that probably costs more than my rent. He claps his hands together, his smirk stretching wide. "Gather round, peasants," he announces loudly. "Your golden boy is moving on to greener pastures." I exchange a baffled look with Ashley, who mouths, "What the hell?" Chad grins like a Cheshire cat, relishing the attention. "That's right, folks. I've hit the jackpot. No more late nights, no more deadlines, no more Amber breathing down my neck. I'm leaving this dump behind." Amber emerges from her office, her face a storm cloud. "Chad, what's the meaning of this?" He laughs obnoxiously, spreading his arms wide. "Oh, Amber, sweet, simple Amber. I don't have to explain myself to you anymore. I'm rich, baby." I bite my lip to hide my smirk. Little does Chad know, his so-called success is about to come crashing down, and he's standing right on the edge of the cliff. I can't believe what I'm hearing. Chad's arrogance has reached new heights. It's time to put an end to this, once and for all. "Actually, Chad," I say, stepping forward, my voice steady but firm, "I think you do need to explain yourself." The room falls into a heavy silence as I pull out a folder and hand it to Amber. "This contains evidence of Chad's theft of intellectual property, fraudulent reports, and misappropriation of company resources," I say clearly, my eyes locked on Chad's now panicked face. His smug grin disappears, replaced by a flicker of panic. "What? That's ridiculous!" "You're just jealous of my success." "Success?" I scoff, holding up a printout of the fake lottery ticket he'd shown around. "You mean this? Hate to break it to you, Chad, but your so-called jackpot is as fake as your work ethic." The office erupts into chaos. Kevin, red-faced with fury, lunges at Chad, shouting about the money he's owed. Others join in, their voices rising with accusations, each one demanding answers. It's a storm of frustration, all directed at him. "Security!" Amber yells, her voice slicing through the noise. "Escort Mr. Swift out of the building." Chad struggles, protesting his innocence, but the security guards are unyielding as they appear, dragging him out while he shouts, "This is a setup! You'll regret this!" His words fall on deaf ears. Amber turns to me with a look of quiet authority. "Sarah, my office, now!" My heart races, the uncertainty of what comes next settling over me as I follow her into her office. She sits behind her desk, her expression unreadable, and gestures to the chair opposite her. "Sit," she says, her voice calm. "Explain everything." I take a deep breath and recount the entire story, from the stolen snacks to the fake lottery ticket and Chad's escalating behavior. As I speak, Amber listens intently, her face shifting from disbelief to anger, and then to something I can only describe as respect. "Well, Sarah," she says finally, her voice measured, "I must say I'm impressed not with your methods, mind you, but with your initiative and dedication to this company." I brace myself, expecting a reprimand, but Amber continues, a slight smile playing on her lips. "It's exactly why I'm offering you Chad's position, effective immediately." I stare at her, stunned. "Really? I mean, thank you, Amber. I won't let you down." Over the next few weeks, the office undergoes a transformation. I implement new policies focused on transparency, teamwork, and accountability. Slowly but surely, morale improves, and the team begins to thrive. We land 3 major new accounts, and the energy in the office is the best it's been in years. As for Chad, his downfall is nothing short of spectacular. News trickles in that he tried to claim his lottery winnings, only to be laughed out of the lottery office when they revealed his ticket was fake. He vanished soon after, leaving behind a legacy of embarrassment. Life in the office isn't perfect, but it's better than it's ever been. As I settle into my new role, I can't help but feel a sense of pride. Justice was served, and the future looks brighter than ever. 2 months later, I found myself at my sister's wedding, standing at the center of the room, glass in hand, ready to give my maid of honor speech. The air buzzed with joy and excitement as everyone settled in to listen. I took a deep breath and began. "Life's funny," I said with a smile. "Sometimes the path to success isn't straight. It's full of twists, turns, and even a few people who try to take advantage of you." The crowd chuckled, and I glanced at Ashley, sitting near the back. She gave me an enthusiastic thumbs up, and I couldn't help but grin. "But if there's one thing I've learned," I continued, "it's this. Integrity and perseverance always win in the end. So, here's to the bride and groom, and to facing life's challenges head on." Applause erupted as I raised my glass, and the bride and groom beamed with happiness. The moment was perfect, filled with love, laughter, and new beginnings. But just as I sat down, my phone buzzed. Curious, I glanced at the screen. It was a news alert. "Former marketing executive arrested for fraud," the headline read. A small smile crept across my face. Karma, I thought. Chad had finally gotten what was coming to him. Apparently, after his dramatic exit from the office, Chad had burned bridges everywhere. He'd scammed so many people that his lies finally caught up to him. Angry creditors, duped coworkers, and false promises had piled up, and now the law had taken notice. Chad wasn't just a disgraced former coworker anymore. He was facing serious consequences. It felt like the final chapter of a wild story. Justice had been served, and in Chad's case, it wasn't just a dish best served cold, it was a full-course meal. The thought of him trying to explain himself in court almost made me laugh out loud, but as I sat there, a question popped into my head. If I were to go back and relive those moments, would I have done anything differently? Would I have exposed Chad's fraud immediately, or let him dig his own grave like I did? Was my approach justified, or did I cross an ethical line somewhere along the way? I decided to throw the question to my audience. "What would you have done in my shoes?" I asked. Would you have confronted Chad right away, or let him unravel his own lies like I did? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your take on this office showdown. Before I left, I added one last note. And if you enjoyed this wild tale of workplace drama and justice, don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe for more juicy stories. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. As I looked around the room, surrounded by my family, friends, and newfound clarity, I realized one thing. Life has a way of rewarding patience and integrity. And for people like Chad, well, karma takes care of the rest. What do you do when the person who's been taking advantage of you finally gets what's coming to them? When you've worked hard, dealt with manipulation, and seen the lies unravel before your eyes, do you stand up and fight, or let karma take its course? Sarah's journey was never about a snack thief. It was about recognizing the patterns, the lies, and the people who tried to pull her down. Chad thought he could get away with it stealing snacks, stealing ideas, even stealing credit for others' hard work. But Sarah wasn't going to let him get away with it. She took matters into her own hands, proving that integrity and perseverance always win in the end. When she exposed Chad's deceit, it wasn't just about a job promotion or petty office drama. It was about making sure that hard work and honesty were recognized, even if it meant bringing down someone who'd been riding on others' coattails. Chad's downfall wasn't just professional, it was personal, and karma made sure he paid the price for his actions. But here's the big question. If you were in Sarah's shoes, would you have acted sooner? Would you have confronted Chad head-on or let him hang himself with his own lies? What would you have done? Let's discuss it in the comments. And if you enjoyed this intense workplace drama, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories.
I should have known something was off the moment Greg's mother, Marion, showed up unannounced at our house. The two of them thought they were being discreet, huddled in the study with the door closed, but their hushed tones carried through the hallway. "You have to tell her," Marion hissed. "Evelyn deserves to know the truth." My heart pounded as I pressed my ear against the door, straining to make out Greg's muffled response. "Wasn't supposed to happen? Mistake. Can't lose everything." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I stumbled back, my mind racing. What truth was Marion talking about? What had Greg done? As the pieces started to fall into place, memories of Greg's late nights at the office and unexplained absences flooded back to me. The signs had been there all along, but I had been too blinded by love and trust to see them. The door swung open, and Greg froze when he saw me standing there. His face drained of color, and I knew in that moment that my life was about to change forever. "Evelyn, I can explain," he began, but I held up a hand to silence him. "Don't bother," I said, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and heartbreak. "I heard enough." Marian averted her gaze, shame etched into her features. She had known about Greg's deception and kept it from me, her own daughter-in-law. "How could you?" I asked, looking between the two of them. "After everything we've been through, how could you betray me like this?" Greg reached for me, but I recoiled from his touch. "It's not what you think," he pleaded. "It was a mistake, a one-time thing that happened years ago." My mind raced, trying to process his words. A one-time thing? That didn't explain the secrecy, the lies, the guilt written all over their faces. "Tell me the truth," I demanded, my voice growing stronger. "I deserve to know what's really going on." Greg exchanged a pained look with his mother before turning back to me. I have a child from an affair I had years ago." The room spun around me as the weight of his confession sank in. A child. Greg had fathered a child with another woman, and they had both kept it from me for God knows how long. "How could you do this to our family?" I choked out, tears stinging my eyes. "How could you lie to me for all these years?" Greg tried to explain, to justify his actions, but his words fell on deaf ears. The man I had loved, the man I had built a life with, was a stranger to me now. In that moment, something shifted inside me. The hurt and betrayal gave way to a burning determination. I would not be a victim in this story. I would not let Greg's deceit define me. "Get out," I said, my voice steady and unwavering. "Both of you, get out of my house." Marian opened her mouth to protest, but I cut her off. "No, you don't get to speak, not after you enabled this for who knows how long." Greg looked at me, pleading, but I had made up my mind. The life we had built together was over, and it was time for me to start writing a new chapter, one where I took control of my own destiny. As they left, I felt a strange sense of clarity wash over me. The road ahead would be long and painful, but I was ready to face it head on. Greg's betrayal had shattered my world, but it would not break me. I was Evelyn Parker, and I was just getting started. After kicking Greg and his mother out of the house, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. The initial shock had worn off, replaced by a steely resolve to uncover the full extent of Greg's deception. I paced the living room, my mind racing. How could he have done this to me, to our family? The man I thought I knew was nothing but a lie. The sound of the front door opening snapped me out of my thoughts. Greg stood in the doorway, his expression a mix of guilt and desperation. "Evelyn, please let me explain," he pleaded, taking a step towards me. I held up a hand, stopping him in his tracks. "Explain what, Greg? How you've been lying to me for years. How you fathered a child with another woman." His shoulders slumped, and he averted his gaze. "It was a mistake, a moment of weakness. It didn't mean anything." "Didn't mean anything?" I scoffed. "You have a child, Greg. A living, breathing human being that you've been keeping from me and our daughters." He flinched at the mention of our girls, and I felt a pang of guilt for the pain this would inevitably cause them. But they deserved to know the truth about their father. "I never meant to hurt you," Greg said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I was going to tell you, I swear." "When, Greg?" I demanded. "When were you going to tell me that our entire marriage has been built on lies?" He opened his mouth, but no words came out. We both knew there was no good answer, no justification for what he had done. "Get out," I said, my voice trembling with barely contained rage. "I don't want to see your face again until you're ready to come clean about everything." Greg looked like he wanted to protest, but something in my expression must have stopped him. He turned and left without another word, the weight of his betrayal hanging heavy in the air. As the door closed behind him, I sank onto the couch, burying my face in my hands. How had everything fallen apart so quickly? Just a few hours ago, my life had been perfect, or so I thought. The sound of footsteps made me look up. Marian stood in the doorway, her expression a mix of shame and pity. "I'm so sorry, Evelyn," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I should have told you the truth from the beginning." I stared at her, my anger reigniting. You knew? You knew about Greg's affair and his child, and you said nothing? She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. I wanted to protect my son, to protect our family, but I see now that I was only enabling his lies. You're damn right you were, I snapped, rising to my feet, and in the process, you betrayed me just as much as he did. Marian flinched at the venom in my words, but she didn't try to defend herself. She knew there was no excuse for her actions. I never meant to hurt you, Evelyn, she said softly. You've been like a daughter to me, and I've failed you in the worst way. Her words did little to soothe the ache in my heart. But as I looked at her, I saw a woman consumed by guilt and regret, and I knew that her punishment would be living with the consequences of her choices. Just go, I said, my voice weary. I can't deal with either of you right now. Marian nodded, her shoulders slumped in defeat. As she turned to leave, she paused and looked back at me. For what it's worth, I'm on your side now, she said. Whatever you need, I'll help you get the justice you deserve. I didn't respond, watching in silence as she left. Her offer rang hollow in my ears. The only thing I wanted was to go back in time, to a place where my life hadn't been shattered by the people I loved most. But that was impossible. All I could do now was pick up the pieces and try to rebuild something from the wreckage of my marriage. And if that meant seeking revenge on Greg, so be it. After Greg and Marian left, I felt utterly alone. The life I had built, the family I thought I had, it was all a lie. I needed someone in my corner, someone who could help me make sense of this nightmare. Loretta, my best friend, would know what to do. She had been through her own marital hell years ago, when her husband cheated. If anyone could understand the pain and betrayal I was feeling, it was her. I dialed her number with shaking hands, the tears I had been holding back finally spilling over. Evelyn, what's wrong? Loretta's concerned voice came through the line. I tried to speak, but the words caught in my throat. How could I even begin to explain the depths of Greg's deception? It's Greg, I managed finally. He had an affair. And there's a child, Loretta. He has a child with another woman. There was a beat of stunned silence on the other end of the line. Oh, honey, Loretta said softly. I'm so sorry. I'm coming over right now, okay? Relief washed over me. I needed Loretta's strength now more than ever. True to her word, she arrived at my doorstep 20 minutes later, enveloping me in a fierce hug as soon as I opened the door. Tell me everything, she said, her voice gentle but firm as she led me to the couch. So I did. I poured out the whole sordid story, overhearing Greg and Marian's conversation, the revelations about his affair and secret child, his feeble attempts at justification. Loretta listened intently, her expression growing darker with each new detail. That lying son of a bitch, she spat when I finished. How could he do this to you, to your family? I shook my head, feeling numb. I don't know. I thought our marriage was solid, that we were happy. But clearly I was just deluding myself. Loretta took my hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. You are not to blame here, Evelyn. This is all on Greg and his selfish, despicable actions. Her words ignited a spark of determination within me. She was right. I wasn't the one who had betrayed our vows, our family. Greg was the one who had shattered everything we had built together. I need to know the full truth, I said, my voice hardening. I need to know every sordid detail of his affair, every lie he's told me over the years. Loretta nodded, her expression resolute. Then that's what we'll do. We'll dig into this thing until we uncover every last secret Greg has been keeping from you. A sense of purpose washed over me. I was done being the victim in this story. It was time to take control and seek the justice I deserved. Over the next few days, Loretta and I became amateur detectives, scouring through Greg's emails, bank statements, anything that could shed light on his double life, and what we found only deepened the wound of his betrayal. Receipts for expensive jewelry and hotel stays. Tender emails exchanged with his mistress, filled with promises of a future together. Bank transfers to an account I had never known about, siphoning off money that should have been going to our family. With each new revelation, the man I thought I knew became more and more of a stranger. But the pain was tempered by a growing sense of determination. Greg had made his bed, and now it was time for him to lie in it. The final piece of the puzzle came in the form of a letter tucked away in a box of Greg's old things in the attic. It was from his mistress, Angela, written years ago, but still dripping with venom. "You promised we would be together," it read. "You promised to leave your wife and build a life with me and our son, but you were just using me, using us, and I'll never forgive you for that. Our son." The words hit me like a physical blow. So it was true. Greg had a child out there, a living, breathing human being that he had rejected and abandoned. As I read the letter again, something shifted inside me. This wasn't just about Greg's betrayal of me anymore. It was about the lives he had destroyed, the innocent people he had hurt in his selfish pursuit of gratification. I looked at Loretta, my eyes blazing with a newfound sense of purpose. "We need to find this Angela," I said, my voice steely with determination. "And we need to make Greg pay for what he's done." Loretta nodded, a grim smile playing across her lips. "Whatever it takes, Evelyn. That bastard is going to wish he never crossed us." The path ahead was long and uncertain, but one thing was clear. Greg's web of lies was about to unravel, and I would be the one holding the scissors. Just when I thought the worst was over, the universe decided to throw another curveball my way. Jessica and Laura, my 2 daughters, came home for their regular weekend visit, blissfully unaware of the turmoil that had erupted in our family. As soon as they walked through the door, I could sense something was off. The usual warmth and laughter were replaced by a palpable tension that hung thick in the air. "Mom, is everything okay?" Jessica asked, ever the perceptive one. I forced a smile, not wanting to burden them with the truth just yet. "Of course, honey, why wouldn't it be?" Laura frowned, her brow furrowing. "Where's Dad? He's usually here to greet us." My heart clenched at the mention of Greg. How could I possibly explain his betrayal to our daughters, the 2 people he had sworn to love and protect above all else? "Your father," I began, but the words stuck in my throat. Jessica's eyes narrowed, and she exchanged a worried glance with her sister. "Mom, what's going on? You're scaring us." In that moment, I knew I couldn't keep them in the dark any longer. They deserved to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. "Girls, there's something I need to tell you," I said, gesturing for them to sit down. "It's about your father." I proceeded to lay out the sordid details of Greg's affair and the existence of his illegitimate child. With each revelation, their expressions morphed from confusion to disbelief to utter devastation. "No, that can't be true," Laura whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Dad would never do something like that." Jessica, ever the strong one, clenched her jaw, her eyes blazing with anger. "That lying bastard," she spat. "How could he do this to us, to our family?" I reached out to comfort them, but Laura recoiled from my touch, her body shaking with sobs. In that moment, I felt utterly helpless, unable to shield my daughters from the pain their father had inflicted upon us all. The sound of the front door opening made us all turn. Greg stood in the entryway, his expression a mix of guilt and apprehension. "Girls, I can explain," he began, but Jessica cut him off with a withering glare. "Save it, Dad," she snarled. "We know all about your little secret family." Greg flinched as if he'd been struck, his gaze shifting to me accusingly. "Evelyn, why would you tell them?" "They didn't need to know." "Didn't need to know?" I echoed incredulously. "They're your daughters, Greg. They deserve the truth, no matter how ugly it might be." Laura rose to her feet, her eyes red-rimmed but her expression hardening. "How could you do this to us, Dad? To Mom? We trusted you, and you betrayed us in the worst way possible." Greg opened his mouth, but no words came out. For once, the man who had spun a web of lies for years was rendered speechless. "I think you should leave," Jessica said, her voice low and dangerous. "We don't want you here right now." Greg looked like he wanted to protest, but one glance at the fury etched on our faces must have convinced him otherwise. He turned and left without another word, the weight of his actions hanging heavy in the air. As the door closed behind him, I gathered my daughters in a fierce embrace, our tears mingling together. In that moment, we were united in our pain and betrayal, like a bond forged by the man who had sworn to love and protect us above all else. "We'll get through this together," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "Greg may have shattered our family, but he hasn't broken us." Jessica and Laura clung to me, their bodies shaking with sobs. But beneath the pain, I could sense a steely resolve taking root. a determination to make Greg pay for what he had done, no matter the cost. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but we would face it as a united front. Greg's lies had torn us apart, but they had also brought us closer together than ever before. And in that moment, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would emerge stronger and more resilient than ever before. In the aftermath of Greg's betrayal, I found myself at a crossroads. Part of me wanted to curl up and lick my wounds, to retreat from the world that had so thoroughly shattered my illusions, but a stronger, more defiant part of me knew that I couldn't let Greg's actions define me. I needed to take control, to seek justice not just for myself, but for all the lives he had so carelessly upended. That's when I remembered Angela, Greg's former mistress, the woman he had used and discarded like a piece of trash. If anyone understood the depths of his deception, it was her. Tracking her down wasn't easy, but Loretta's investigative skills proved invaluable. After weeks of digging, we finally uncovered an address in a modest neighborhood across town. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Loretta asked as we pulled up to the nondescript house. "This woman has every reason to hate you." I took a deep breath, steeling my resolve. "I have to try. She's the only one who can help me understand the full scope of what Greg has done." Loretta gave me a reassuring squeeze on the shoulder before I made my way up the cracked sidewalk to the front door. With trembling fingers, I rang the bell. The door swung open, and a woman with tired eyes and a guarded expression stood before me. Even without an introduction, I knew this was Angela. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone laced with suspicion. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "My name is Evelyn Parker. I'm Greg's wife." Her expression hardened, and for a moment I thought she might slam the door in my face. But then something shifted in her eyes, a glimmer of recognition, of shared pain. "I see," she said finally. "I suppose you're here about our son. Our son." The words hit me like a physical blow, but I refused to let my emotions show. "Among other things, yes. May I come in?" Angela hesitated for a moment before stepping aside, allowing me to enter the modest living room. As I took a seat on the well-worn couch, a teenage boy emerged from one of the bedrooms, his features a striking blend of Greg's and Angela's. "Tobias, this is Evelyn," Angela said, her voice softening as she addressed her son. She's your father's wife." Tobias's eyes widened, and he regarded me with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. In that moment, I saw the weight of Greg's actions reflected in his eyes, the burden of being an unwanted secret, a constant reminder of his father's betrayal. "I won't beat around the bush," I said, turning my attention back to Angela. "I know about Greg's affair, and I know about Tobias. What I don't know is the full extent of his lies and manipulation." Angela's expression hardened once more, and she let out a bitter laugh. "Where do I even begin? Greg promised me the world. He said he would leave you, that we could be a real family. But it was all lies, just another way for him to get what he wanted without any real consequences." As she spoke, the pieces began to fall into place. Greg's frequent business trips, his unexplained absences, they had all been part of his double life, a life he had so carefully constructed to keep us all in the dark. "He left me to raise Tobias alone," Angela continued, her voice thick with emotion. "No child support, no acknowledgement of his existence, just empty promises and a lifetime of pain." I reached out and took her hand, my own eyes stinging with tears. "I'm so sorry," I said, the words feeling woefully inadequate. "You didn't deserve any of this." Angela squeezed my hand, her expression softening. "Neither did you, Evelyn. We were both victims of Greg's selfish games." In that moment, I knew what I had to do. Greg had torn our lives apart, but in doing so, he had also forged an unlikely bond between Angela, Tobias, and myself, a bond born of shared betrayal and a thirst for justice. "We can't let him get away with this," I said, my voice hardening with resolve. "He needs to pay for what he's done to all of us." Angela nodded, her eyes blazing with determination. "I'm with you, Evelyn. It's time we made Greg face the consequences of his actions once and for all." Tobias stepped forward, his jaw set in a defiant line. "Count me in, too. I want to know why my own father abandoned me, why he treated me like a dirty secret." In that moment, an unlikely alliance was formed. 3 people united by a common goal, to make Greg answer for his lies and seek the justice we all so desperately craved. It would be a long and difficult road, but together we were stronger than the web of deceit he had spun. As I looked at Angela and Tobias, I saw not just allies, but kindred spirits, people who had been wronged in the most profound way, but who refused to let that define them. We were survivors, fighters, and we would not rest until Greg's carefully constructed facade came crumbling down around him. The battle lines had been drawn, and there was no turning back. Greg had made his choices, and now it was time for him to face the consequences. With Angela and Tobias as unlikely allies, a plan began to take shape. We would confront Greg, lay bare the full extent of his lies and betrayal, and force him to face the consequences of his actions. But we couldn't do it alone. We needed to expose his web of deceit to the people closest to him, the ones he had so carefully kept in the dark. That's when Marian re-entered the picture. Despite her initial complicity in protecting Greg, she had ultimately chosen to stand by my side. Her eyes finally opened to the depths of her son's depravity. Together, we would make Greg's carefully constructed facade come crumbling down around him. The confrontation was set for a Sunday afternoon at a local restaurant, a public setting where Greg's lies would be laid bare for all to see. As Angela, Tobias, and I took our seats, my heart pounded with a mix of nervous anticipation and righteous fury. Greg arrived a few minutes later, his brow furrowed in confusion when he saw our unlikely gathering. "Evelyn, what's going on here?" he asked, his voice laced with suspicion. Before I could respond, Marian stepped forward, her expression one of steely determination. "It's time you faced the truth, Gregory," she said, using his full name in a rare display of seriousness. "These people know everything about your lies, your betrayal, and they're here to make sure you can't hide from it any longer." Greg's eyes widened as he took in Angela and Tobias, realization dawning on his features. "You," he stammered, pointing an accusatory finger at Angela. "What lies have you been telling my wife?" Angela met his gaze unflinchingly. "The only lies here are the ones you've been spinning for years, Greg. It's time you owned up to the fact that you have a son, a child you abandoned without a second thought." Tobias stepped forward, his jaw set in a defiant line. "I'm not a secret anymore, Dad. I'm here in the flesh, and I want answers. Why did you leave us? Why did you treat me like I didn't even exist?" Greg's eyes darted around the restaurant, panic setting in as he realized the scene we were causing. "This is ridiculous," he sputtered. "Evelyn, you can't honestly believe these people over your own husband." I rose to my feet, my hands balled into fists at my sides. "Don't you dare try to play the victim here, Greg. I know everything, the affairs, the lies, the secret bank accounts. You've been living a double life for years, and it's time you paid the price for it." Greg opened his mouth to respond, but Marian cut him off, her voice trembling with barely contained rage. "Don't even try to deny it, son," she spat. "I've seen the evidence with my own eyes. You've disgraced our family, disgraced everything we stand for, all for your own selfish desires." The restaurant had fallen silent, all eyes trained on our explosive confrontation. Greg looked around wildly, his carefully cultivated persona crumbling before our very eyes. "You're all delusional?" he snarled, his composure finally cracking. "Evelyn, how could you believe these people over me, your own husband?" I met his gaze, my eyes hard and unyielding. "Because they're not the ones who betrayed me, Greg. You are, and now everyone is going to know exactly what kind of man you really are." With those words, the dam broke. Angela, Tobias, and I laid out the sordid details of Greg's double life, his lies and manipulations, his utter disregard for the people he had sworn to love and protect. And with each damning revelation, Greg's protests grew weaker, his excuses more feeble. By the time we were finished, the entire restaurant was enveloped in a stunned silence. Greg stood alone, his reputation in tatters, his carefully constructed facade shattered beyond repair. As he turned to leave, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Marian called out to him one final time. "You've made your bed, Gregory," she said, her voice laced with disappointment and regret. "Now you can lie in it, alone." And just like that, the man who had once been the center of my world was gone, reduced to a mere shadow of the person I thought I had known. In that moment, I felt a profound sense of liberation, as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. Greg's lies had nearly destroyed me, but in the end, they had only made me stronger. With Angela, Tobias, and my newfound support system at my side, I was ready to start rebuilding my life on my own terms, a life free from the shackles of deception and betrayal. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a glimmer of hope. Greg had played his games, spun his lies, but in the end, the truth had prevailed. And as I looked around at the faces of my allies, my family, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, united by our shared strength and resilience. The battle had been won, but the war was just beginning. And this time, I was the one calling the shots. In the aftermath of our explosive confrontation with Greg, the shockwaves rippled through every aspect of our lives. His carefully constructed facade had been shattered, leaving him exposed and vulnerable in a way I had never seen before. Within days, the news of his betrayal had spread like wildfire through our social circles. Friends and acquaintances who had once admired and respected him now looked upon him with a mix of disgust and pity. Greg's reputation, the very thing he had worked so hard to cultivate, was in tatters. But as Greg's world crumbled around him, mine was just beginning to rebuild. With Angela, Tobias, and my newfound support system at my side, I felt a sense of empowerment and purpose that had been missing for far too long. Marion, once Greg's staunchest defender, was now one of my closest allies. The guilt and shame she felt over enabling her son's lies had given way to a fierce determination to make amends, to stand by my side as I navigated this new chapter of my life. "I failed you, Evelyn," she said to me one afternoon, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "I let my blind devotion to Gregory cloud my judgment, and in doing so, I betrayed the woman who has been like a daughter to me." I reached out and took her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "What's done is done, Marion. All we can do now is move forward together." She nodded, her expression resolute. "You have my word, Evelyn. From this day forward, I will be the ally and support system you deserve. Gregory has made his choices, and now he must face the consequences." True to her word, Marion became a pillar of strength in the days and weeks that followed. As Greg's desperate attempts to reconcile were met with stony silence from all corners, she stood firm in her rejection of his pleas. "You brought this upon yourself, son," she told him during one particularly heated exchange. "You betrayed not just Evelyn, but this entire family. And for what? A fleeting moment of selfish pleasure?" Greg, once so confident and self-assured, withered under his mother's withering gaze. It was a stark reminder of just how far he had fallen, how thoroughly his lies had alienated him from those who had once been his biggest supporters. As for me, I found myself buoyed by a newfound sense of independence and purpose. The job I had once seen as a mere means to an end had taken on a new significance, a way for me to assert my self-worth and financial independence. It was during this time that an unexpected opportunity presented itself. A managerial position, one that would not only provide greater financial security, but also a chance to prove my leadership capabilities. "You've more than earned this, Evelyn," my boss told me as she extended the offer. "Your resilience and determination in the face of such personal turmoil have been an inspiration to us all." I accepted without hesitation, relishing the chance to take control of my own destiny. No longer would I be defined by Greg's actions or the life he had tried to force upon me. This was my chance to forge my own path, to show the world that I was more than just a victim of circumstance. As I settled into my new role, I found myself drawing strength from the support system that had rallied around me. Angela, once a bitter rival, had become a trusted confidant, her own experiences with Greg's betrayal giving her a unique perspective on the challenges I faced. "We're survivors, Evelyn," she told me one evening as we shared a bottle of wine. "Greg tried to break us, but in the end, he only made us stronger." Tobias, too, had become an integral part of my life, a constant reminder of the collateral damage wrought by Greg's selfish actions. As he navigated the turbulent waters of adolescence, I found myself drawn to his quiet strength and resilience, qualities that had been forged in the fires of his father's abandonment. Together, we formed an unlikely family unit, bound not by blood but by a shared experience of betrayal and a determination to rise above it. And as the months passed, I found myself looking to the future with a sense of hope and optimism that had been sorely lacking for far too long. Greg's desperate attempts to worm his way back into our lives were met with a united front of indifference and disdain. He had made his choices, and now he would have to live with the consequences, a life spent on the fringes, a mere shadow of the man he had once been. As for me, I was done living in his shadow. With each passing day, I felt myself growing stronger, more confident in my ability to forge my own path. The scars of Greg's betrayal would never fully heal, but they had become a badge of honor, a testament to my resilience and determination to rise above the ashes of my former life. And as I looked ahead to the future, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, I would face them head-on, surrounded by the love and support of those who had become my true family. A family forged not by blood, but by the fires of adversity and the unbreakable bonds of sisterhood. In the months that followed Greg's downfall, a profound shift took place within our unlikely sisterhood. What had begun as a shared mission of revenge and retribution evolved into something far more profound, a movement dedicated to empowering and supporting women who had faced similar betrayals. It started small, with Loretta, Angela, Marian, and I meeting for weekly coffee dates, sharing our stories and offering each other the kind of understanding and solidarity that could only come from those who had walked the same painful path. But word soon spread, and before long, our little gathering had grown into a full-fledged support group, a safe haven for women seeking to rebuild their lives in the aftermath of betrayal. "We're more than just survivors," Loretta declared at one of our early meetings. "We're warriors, fighters who have stared down the darkness and emerged stronger on the other side." Her words resonated deeply with all of us, a rallying cry for the resilience and determination that had carried us through our darkest hours. We were no longer victims, defined by the actions of the men who had wronged us. We were women in control of our own destinies, forging new paths on our own terms. As our numbers grew, so too did our sense of purpose. We began organizing workshops and seminars, sharing our stories, and offering practical advice on everything from navigating the legal system to rebuilding self-esteem in the wake of emotional trauma. Marian, ever the matriarch, took a particular interest in mentoring the younger women in our group, offering a wisdom and perspective that could only come from a lifetime of experience. "You are not defined by the actions of others," she would say, her voice firm but laced with warmth. "You are strong, capable women with the power to shape your own futures." Angela, too, became a driving force within our movement, her own experiences with Greg's betrayal lending a raw authenticity to her words. She and Tobias formed an unbreakable bond, a living testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of adversity. "We may have been dealt a tough hand," Angela would tell our group, her arm draped protectively around her son's shoulders, "but it's up to us to decide how we play the cards we're given." As for me, I found myself drawn into a leadership role almost by default. My story, the public unraveling of Greg's lies, had become a rallying cry for women seeking to reclaim their power and agency. And as my newfound confidence and independence blossomed, so too did my determination to use my platform to inspire and empower others. "We are not victims," I would say, my voice ringing out with conviction. "We are survivors, warriors who have faced down the darkness and emerged stronger on the other side." My words seemed to strike a chord, resonating with women from all walks of life who had found themselves betrayed and belittled by the men who were supposed to love and cherish them. And as our movement grew, so too did the sense of sisterhood and solidarity that bound us together. Jessica and Laura, my own daughters, became active participants in our group, their own experiences with their father's betrayal fueling a fierce determination to support and uplift other women facing similar struggles. It was a source of immense pride for me, watching them channel their pain into a force for positive change. "We may have been dealt a tough hand," Laura would say, echoing Angela's words, "but we're not going to let it define us. We're going to use it as fuel to build something better, something stronger." And build we did. What had started as a small gathering of wounded souls quickly blossomed into a powerful movement, a force for change and empowerment that stretched far beyond the confines of our little support group. We organized fundraisers, and awareness campaigns, partnering with local shelters and advocacy organizations to provide resources and support for women in crisis. We lobbied for stronger legal protections and harsher penalties for those who perpetrated emotional and financial abuse. And through it all, we remained a tight-knit sisterhood, bound by our shared experiences and an unwavering commitment to lifting each other up. We celebrated each other's triumphs, big and small, and offered a shoulder to lean on during the inevitable setbacks and challenges. As for Greg, he had become little more than a footnote in our lives, a cautionary tale of what happens when selfishness and deceit are allowed to fester unchecked. His desperate attempts to reconcile or insert himself back into our lives were met with a wall of indifference, a stark reminder that he had forfeited his place in our world the moment he chose to betray us. In the end, his legacy would be one of pain and disappointment, a cautionary tale of what happens when a man puts his own desires above the well-being of those he claims to love. But our legacy, the legacy of the women he had wronged, would be one of resilience, strength, and unwavering sisterhood. As I looked around at the faces of the women who had become my chosen family, I felt a profound sense of gratitude and pride. We had been through hell and back, but we had emerged on the other side stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever before. The road ahead was long and uncertain, but one thing was clear. We would face it together, united by our shared experiences and an unbreakable bond of sisterhood. And no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would meet them head-on, armed with the knowledge that we were warriors, survivors who had stared down the darkness and emerged victorious. Ellen, I can't keep this to myself any longer. Harold has been seeing someone else. I saw them at the cafe today. Miriam's words hit me like a punch to the gut as we sat in my living room, sipping tea. My hands trembled, nearly spilling the hot liquid onto my lap. I stared at her, my mind reeling. What do you mean, seeing someone else? That can't be true. Harold would never... My voice trailed off as doubt crept in. The late nights at work, the secretive phone calls, the distant behavior, it all started to make a sickening kind of sense. Miriam reached out and squeezed my hand. I'm so sorry, Ellen. I debated whether to tell you, but I couldn't bear the thought of you being in the dark. You deserve to know the truth. Tears welled up in my eyes as the reality sank in. After 35 years of marriage, countless sacrifices, and unwavering dedication to our family, Harold had betrayed me. The man I had built a life with, the father of my children, had been lying to me, sneaking around behind my back. What do I do now, Miriam? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. How could he do this to me, to our family? Miriam pulled me into a tight embrace. You're strong, Ellen. You'll get through this. And you have me, Claire, and Harold Jr. We'll support you every step of the way. I nodded, wiping away the tears that now flowed freely down my cheeks. A wave of emotions crashed over me. Shock, anger, hurt, and a deep sense of betrayal. How could I have been so blind? The signs were there, but I had chosen to ignore them, to believe in the illusion of our perfect marriage. As I sat there, my mind raced with questions. Who was this other woman? How long had it been going on? Did our children know? The thought of Claire and Harold Jr. finding out about their father's infidelity broke my heart all over again. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I need to confront him. Miriam, I need to hear the truth from his own lips. Miriam nodded. Of course, Ellen. But remember, you don't have to do this alone. I'm here for you, no matter what. I managed a weak smile, grateful for her unwavering support. Thank you, Miriam. I don't know what I would do without you. As we finished our tea, a newfound determination began to rise within me. I couldn't let Harold's betrayal define me. I had to be strong, not just for myself, but for my children. They deserved a mother who fought for the truth, who stood up for herself and her family. I glanced at the clock, knowing Harold would be home soon. The confrontation loomed ahead and my stomach churned with a mix of dread and anticipation, but I knew I had to face it head-on. I couldn't live a lie any longer. With Miriam by my side, I steeled myself for the battle ahead. I would demand answers, uncover the truth, and fight for the life I deserved. Harold's secrets would be brought to light, and I would emerge stronger, no matter how painful the journey might be. As the front door clicked open, signaling Harold's arrival, I took a deep breath and rose to my feet. It was time to confront the dark secrets that had been lurking in the shadows of our marriage. The truth would set me free, even if it shattered everything I had once believed in. The tension in the kitchen was palpable as I waited for Harold to come home. The ticking of the clock seemed to echo in my ears, each second dragging on for an eternity. When the front door finally opened, I steeled myself, ready to confront the man I had once trusted with my entire life. Harold walked in, his eyes widening as he saw me standing there, arms crossed. "Ellen, what's going on?" "We need to talk, Harold." My voice was steady, masking the turmoil within. "I know about the affair." His face paled, and he took a step back. "What are you talking about? There's no affair. You're being ridiculous." Anger flared within me. "Don't lie to me, Harold. Miriam saw you with her at the cafe. How could you do this to me, to our family?" Harold's expression shifted from shock to defensiveness. "Miriam? She's always been jealous of our marriage. You can't believe everything she says." I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. "Stop making excuses, Harold. I've seen the signs for months now, the late nights, the secretive phone calls. I just didn't want to believe it." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in his voice. "Do you really think I want to come home to this every day? To your constant nagging and suspicions?" His words cut deep, but I refused to back down. "So that justifies betraying our marriage vows? Betraying the life we've built together?" Our voices grew louder, the argument escalating. Claire and Harold Jr. emerged from their rooms, concern etched on their faces as they witnessed the unfolding drama. "Mom, Dad, what's going on?" Claire asked, her eyes darting between us. I took a deep breath, trying to compose myself. "Your father has something he needs to tell you." Harold glared at me before turning to our children. "It's nothing. Your mother is just overreacting, as usual." Claire stepped forward, her gaze fixed on Harold. "Dad, please, just tell us the truth." The room fell silent, the weight of the moment pressing down on us all. Harold's shoulders slumped, and he let out a heavy sigh. "Fine. I've been seeing someone else, but it's not what you think." Tears streamed down my face as the confirmation of his infidelity hit me like a tidal wave. Claire gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, while Harold Jr. stood frozen, disbelief etched on his features. "How could you, Dad?" Claire's voice trembled with a mix of anger and hurt. "How could you do this to Mom, to our family?" Harold's defensive demeanor crumbled under the scrutiny of our children. "It just happened. I never meant to hurt anyone." I wiped away my tears, a newfound strength rising within me. "But you did, Harold. You hurt all of us, and now you have to face the consequences." He looked at me, a flicker of fear in his eyes. "What do you mean, consequences?" "I want a divorce, Harold. I won't live a lie anymore. I deserve better than this, and so do our children." The room fell silent once more, the weight of my words sinking in. Harold's face contorted with a mix of emotions, anger, regret, and perhaps even a hint of relief. Claire stepped forward, placing a supportive hand on my shoulder. "We're here for you, Mom. You don't have to go through this alone." I nodded, grateful for her unwavering support. Harold Jr. remained silent, his eyes downcast, processing the revelation of his father's betrayal. As the initial shock subsided, a flurry of questions and accusations filled the air. The cracks in our family's foundation had been exposed, and the road ahead would be far from easy. But in that moment, I knew I had made the right decision. I refused to be a victim any longer. I would face the challenges head-on, with the love and support of my children by my side. The confrontation had opened a new chapter in our lives, one filled with uncertainty and pain. But it was also a chapter of truth, of reclaiming my dignity and self-worth. As I looked into Harold's eyes, I saw a man I no longer recognized. The love and trust we had once shared had been shattered, replaced by the bitter reality of his deceit. There would be no turning back now. The journey ahead would be difficult, but I was ready to fight for the life I deserved, free from the shadows of betrayal. In the aftermath of the confrontation with Harold, I found myself sitting in the living room, my mind reeling from the events that had transpired. The weight of his betrayal pressed down on me, threatening to crush my very soul. As I sat there, lost in thought, Claire walked in and sat beside me, her presence a comforting balm to my wounded heart. "Mom, You don't have to put up with this, she said, her voice filled with concern and determination. You deserve so much better than what Dad has done to you. I looked at my daughter, tears welling up in my eyes. I know, Claire, but it's not that simple. We've been married for 35 years. I never thought he would be capable of something like this. Claire took my hand in hers, squeezing it gently. I understand, Mom, but you can't let him get away with it. You can't let him continue to hurt you like this. As we talked, Claire began to recount past incidents of Harold's erratic behavior. The late nights at the office, the secretive phone calls, the unexplained absences. Each revelation felt like a knife twisting in my gut, confirming the suspicions I had tried so hard to ignore. Remember when he missed your birthday dinner last year? Claire asked, her brow furrowed. He claimed he had to work late, but I saw him at the mall with a woman I didn't recognize. My heart sank further as the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. The extent of Harold's deceit was far greater than I had initially realized. Blood began to boil within me as the anger and betrayal consumed my thoughts. I can't believe I was so blind, I said, my voice trembling with a mix of sadness and rage. How could I have let this go on for so long? Claire wrapped her arm around my shoulders, pulling me close. It's not your fault, Mom. Dad is the one who chose to betray your trust. You didn't do anything wrong. Her words provided a glimmer of comfort amidst the darkness that had engulfed my world. I knew I had to be strong, not just for myself, but for my children as well. They deserved a mother who fought for what was right, who refused to be a victim of her husband's selfish actions. You're right, Claire, I said, my resolve strengthening with each passing moment. I can't let your father's betrayal define me. I have to stand up for myself and for our family. Claire nodded, a fierce determination in her eyes. We'll get through this together, Mom. I'll be by your side every step of the way. As we sat there, plotting our next move, I felt a sense of empowerment rising within me. I had spent too many years living in the shadow of Harold's lies and deceit. It was time to take back control of my life, to rebuild what he had so carelessly destroyed. First things first, I said, my voice steady and unwavering. I'm going to file for divorce. I won't let him continue to manipulate and control me. Claire smiled, pride shining in her eyes. That's the mom I know and love, strong, resilient, and ready to fight for what she deserves. With my daughter's support and the truth finally exposed, I knew I had the strength to face the challenges that lay ahead. Harold's betrayal had shattered our family, but it had also awakened a fire within me, a determination to rise above the pain and forge a new path for myself. As Claire and I continued to talk, planning our next steps, I felt a sense of hope blossoming amidst the chaos. The road ahead would be difficult, but I knew I had the love and support of my children to guide me through the darkness. Harold's secrets had been brought to light, and now it was time for me to reclaim my life, to build a future free from the shadows of his betrayal. With each passing moment, my resolve grew stronger, fueled by the love and loyalty of my daughter. Together we would weather this storm and emerge stronger, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The journey of healing and empowerment had only just begun, but I knew I was no longer alone in this fight. Just as I thought the storm of Harold's betrayal couldn't get any worse, an unexpected visitor arrived at my doorstep. Beatrice, Harold's overbearing mother, barged into my home without so much as a hello, her face etched with disapproval and contempt. You should have kept your family affairs in check, Ellen. It's all your fault Harold strayed, she said, her voice dripping with venom. I stood there, stunned by her audacity. How dare she come into my home and accuse me of being responsible for Harold's infidelity? Anger bubbled up inside me, threatening to spill over. Excuse me, Beatrice, but I don't think you have any right to come here and blame me for your son's actions, I said, my voice trembling with barely contained rage. Beatrice scoffed, her eyes narrowing. Please, Ellen. If you had been a better wife, Harold wouldn't have had to seek comfort elsewhere. You've always been too focused on your own needs, neglecting your duties as a spouse. Her words cut deep, reopening wounds I thought had long since healed. Memories of the countless sacrifices I had made for our family, the years I had devoted to being a loving wife and mother, all came rushing back. How dare you, I said, my voice rising with each word. I have given everything to this family, to Harold. I have been by his side through thick and thin, and this is how he repays me? By betraying our marriage vows and seeking solace in the arms of another woman? Beatrice remained unmoved, her face a mask of cold indifference. You have no one to blame but yourself, Ellen. If you had been more attentive, more understanding, none of this would have happened. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The audacity of this woman to come into my home and spew such vile accusations. It was as if she had completely disregarded the pain and heartbreak her son had inflicted upon me. Get out of my house, Beatrice, I said, my voice low and dangerous. I will not stand here and listen to you defend Harold's despicable actions. He made his choice, and now he must face the consequences. Beatrice's eyes flashed with anger, but she remained rooted in place. You're making a mistake, Ellen. Harold is a good man, and you're throwing away a lifetime of marriage over a simple indiscretion. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head in disbelief. A simple indiscretion? Is that what you call betraying your spouse, lying to your family, and destroying the trust that holds a marriage together? The room fell silent, the tension so thick it was almost suffocating. Beatrice and I stood there, locked in a battle of wills, neither of us willing to back down. Finally, Beatrice spoke, her voice cold and unforgiving. You mark my words, Ellen. You'll regret this decision. Harold is the best thing that ever happened to you, and you're throwing it all away. With that, she turned on her heel and stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind her. I stood there, trembling with a mixture of anger and exhaustion, the weight of her words hanging heavy in the air. But amidst the chaos and the pain, a newfound resolve began to take hold. Beatrice's visit had only strengthened my determination to break free from the toxic influence of Harold and his family. I refused to be a victim any longer, to be blamed for the actions of a man who had so carelessly thrown away our life together. I took a deep breath, squaring my shoulders as I prepared for the battle ahead. Harold and Beatrice may have thought they could break me, but they had underestimated the strength that lay within. I would fight for my dignity, for my right to a life free from betrayal and deceit. With each passing moment, my resolve grew stronger, fueled by the love and support of my children and the knowledge that I deserved better. I would not let Harold's betrayal define me, nor would I allow Beatrice's cruel words to shake my determination. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but I was ready to face whatever challenges lay in store. I had the truth on my side, and I would not rest until justice was served and my family was free from the shadows of Harold's betrayal. The confrontation with Beatrice had left me emotionally drained, but it had also ignited a fire within me. I knew I couldn't let Harold's betrayal continue to poison our family. It was time to take a stand, to put an end to the lies and deceit that had plagued our marriage for far too long. Late that night, I found myself in our bedroom, waiting for Harold to return home. The minutes ticked by, each one feeling like an eternity. When he finally walked through the door, I was ready, my resolve unwavering. "We need to talk, Harold," I said, my voice steady and firm. He looked at me, his eyes narrowing. "Can't this wait until morning, Ellen? I'm exhausted." I shook my head, standing my ground. "No, it can't wait. I've had enough of your lies and betrayal. I know about the affair, and I won't tolerate it any longer." Harold's face paled, and for a moment I saw a flicker of fear in his eyes, but it was quickly replaced by anger, his features twisting into a scowl. "You've crossed the line, Harold. It's over," I said, my voice rising with each word. "I want a divorce." He laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that sent chills down my spine. "You think you can just end our marriage, just like that? You're nothing without me, Ellen. You'll be lost without my support." I felt a surge of anger course through my veins, and I stepped forward, my eyes blazing with fury. "I am not nothing, Harold. I am a strong, capable woman who has given everything to this family, and I will not let you treat me like a doormat any longer." He moved towards me, his hand raised as if to strike me, but before he could make contact, Claire burst into the room, her eyes wide with fear and anger. "Don't you dare lay a hand on her, Dad," she shouted, placing herself between us. "Mom is right. You've crossed the line, and we won't stand for it anymore." Harold's face contorted with rage, and he lunged forward, trying to push past Claire. But she stood her ground, her eyes blazing with determination. "I'm moving in with Mom," she declared, her voice unwavering. We're going to support each other through this, and you won't be able to hurt her anymore." Harold's eyes darted between us, realization dawning on his face. He knew he had lost, that his carefully constructed web of lies was crumbling around him. "You'll regret this," he snarled, his voice dripping with venom. "You'll both regret turning against me." With that, he stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. Claire and I stood there, trembling with a mixture of fear and relief. We had done it. We had stood up to Harold, and we had won. But even as the adrenaline coursed through my veins, I knew that this was only the beginning. Harold would not go down without a fight, and we had to be prepared for whatever he might throw our way. Claire wrapped her arms around me, holding me tight. "We're in this together, Mom," she whispered, her voice filled with love and support. "We'll get through this, no matter what." I nodded, tears streaming down my face. I knew that the road ahead would be difficult, that there would be challenges and obstacles at every turn. But with Claire by my side, I felt a newfound strength rising within me. We had taken the first step towards freedom, towards a life free from Harold's toxic influence, and we would not rest until we had achieved that goal, no matter the cost. As the night wore on, Claire and I sat together, planning our next move. We knew that we had to be strategic, that we had to gather evidence and build a case against Harold. But even as we plotted and schemed, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. For the first time in years, I felt like I was in control of my own life, that I was no longer a prisoner of Harold's lies and deceit. The breaking point had been reached, and there was no turning back now. The journey ahead would be long and difficult, but I knew that with the love and support of my daughter, I could face anything that came my way. As Claire and I settled into our new apartment, the weight of the past few weeks began to lift from my shoulders. We had taken the first step towards freedom, towards a life free from Harold's lies and deceit. But even as we unpacked our belongings and started to make this place our own, I knew that our journey was far from over. One evening, as we sat at the dinner table, Claire looked at me with a determined glint in her eye. "We're going to make sure he regrets every betrayal, Mom," she said, her voice filled with a quiet fury. I nodded, my own anger simmering just beneath the surface. "You're right, Claire. We can't let him get away with what he's done. Not just to me, but to our family, to the life we built together." We began to brainstorm, plotting our next move. We knew that we needed evidence, something concrete that would expose Harold's infidelity and deceitfulness to the world. "I've been thinking," Claire said, her brow furrowed in concentration. "What if we reached out to the other women Dad has been involved with? If we can get them to come forward to share their stories, it would be impossible for him to deny the truth." I felt a flicker of hope ignite within me. "That's a brilliant idea, Claire. If we can show a pattern of behavior, a history of lies and betrayal, it will be much harder for him to wriggle out of the consequences." We spent the next few days reaching out to the women Harold had wronged, gathering their stories and their evidence. Each conversation left me feeling more empowered, more determined to see this through to the end. As we pieced together the puzzle of Harold's deceit, I felt a sense of clarity wash over me. For too long, I had been living in the shadows of his lies, allowing his actions to dictate the course of my life. But now, with Claire by my side and the truth on our side, I knew that I had the strength to fight back. We compiled the evidence, creating a dossier that laid bare the extent of Harold's betrayals. Photographs, text messages, emails, all of it painted a picture of a man who had no regard for the sanctity of his marriage vows, who had no qualms about destroying the lives of those closest to him. As I flipped through the pages of the dossier, I felt a sense of empowerment wash over me. For the first time in years, I felt like I was in control of my own destiny, like I was no longer a prisoner of Harold's whims and desires. Claire placed a comforting hand on my shoulder, her eyes shining with pride. "You're so brave, Mom," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "I know this hasn't been easy, but I'm so proud of you for standing up for yourself, for refusing to be a victim any longer." I smiled, tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. "I couldn't have done it without you, Claire. Your support, your love, it's what's kept me going through all of this." We spent the rest of the evening planning our next move, discussing how we would confront Harold with the evidence we had gathered. We knew that it wouldn't be easy, that he would likely fight back with everything he had. But we also knew that we had the truth on our side, that we had the support of each other and the other women he had wronged. And with that knowledge, we felt an unshakable sense of resolve, a determination to see this through to the end. As the night wore on and we retired to our respective bedrooms, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be, like I was finally on the path towards the life I deserved. And with Claire by my side, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, no matter what obstacles Harold might throw in our way, we would face them together, united in our quest for justice and our desire to rebuild our lives on our own terms. The day of reckoning had finally arrived. Claire and I had spent weeks gathering evidence, reaching out to the other women Harold had wronged, and preparing for this moment. As we walked into the local community center where Harold was attending a charity function, I felt a sense of nervous anticipation thrumming through my veins. We had chosen this event carefully, knowing that it would be attended by many of the town's most influential people. Harold had always been so concerned with his reputation, with maintaining the facade of the perfect husband and father. But today, we would shatter that illusion, exposing the truth of his deceit and betrayal for all to see. As we entered the main hall, I spotted Harold across the room, schmoozing with a group of his colleagues. He looked so smug, so self-assured, as if he had no idea of the storm that was about to descend upon him. Claire squeezed my hand, her eyes shining with determination. "Are you ready, Mom?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, steeling myself for what was to come. "Let's do this," I said, my voice steady and resolute. We made our way to the front of the room, where a small stage had been set up for the evening's presentations. As we approached the microphone, I could feel the eyes of the crowd upon us, curious and expectant. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding in my chest. "Good evening, everyone," I began, my voice ringing out clear and strong. "I know many of you are here to support a worthy cause, but I'm afraid I have some troubling news to share with you tonight." The room fell silent, the air thick with tension. I could see Harold's face, his expression shifting from confusion to anger as he realized what was happening. "For years, my husband Harold has been living a double life," I continued, my voice unwavering. "He has been unfaithful to me, to our marriage, and to the vows we made to each other 35 years ago." A gasp rippled through the crowd, followed by a buzz of whispers and murmurs. I could see the shock and disbelief on the faces of those around us, the realization that the man they had thought they knew was not who he appeared to be. "But don't just take my word for it," I said, gesturing to Claire. "We have gathered evidence, testimonies from the women he has wronged, that paint a picture of a man who has no regard for the sanctity of marriage, who has no qualms about destroying the lives of those closest to him." Claire stepped forward, holding up the dossier we had compiled. "We have photographs, text messages, emails, all proving the extent of Harold's betrayal," she said, her voice ringing with righteous anger. "He has lied to us, to all of you, for years, and it's time for the truth to come out." I could see Harold's face turning red, his fists clenched at his sides. He started to move towards us, his eyes blazing with fury, but he was held back by a group of his colleagues, their faces etched with shock and disgust. "The truth always comes out, Harold," I said, my voice filled with a quiet triumph. "And now, everyone here knows the kind of man you really are." The room erupted into chaos, people shouting questions and accusations, demanding answers from Harold. But he stood there, frozen, his reputation crumbling around him like a house of cards. As Claire and I watched the scene unfold, I felt a sense of vindication wash over me. For so long I had suffered in silence, bearing the weight of Harold's betrayal on my shoulders. But now, the truth was out, and he would have to face the consequences of his actions. I knew that the road ahead would not be easy, that there would be challenges and obstacles to overcome. But with Claire by my side and the support of the community behind us, I felt a renewed sense of strength and determination. This was my moment, my chance to reclaim my life and my dignity. And I would not let it slip away, Not now, not ever again. As the dust settled in the wake of Harold's public exposure, Claire and I found ourselves in a new chapter of our lives. We had moved into a cozy new home, leaving behind the painful memories and toxic energy of the past. The sun streamed through the windows, bathing the room in a warm, inviting glow, a perfect reflection of the hope and possibility that now stretched out before us. Claire and I sat at the kitchen table, sipping our morning coffee and reveling in the peace and tranquility of our new surroundings. The weight of the past few months had lifted from our shoulders, replaced by a sense of liberation and empowerment that was both exhilarating and terrifying. "We're finally free, Mom," Claire said, her eyes shining with a mixture of relief and excitement. "What do you want to do next?" I took a deep breath, considering her question. For so long, my life had been defined by Harold's betrayal, by the pain and heartbreak that had consumed me. But now, with the truth exposed and the community rallying behind us, I felt like I could finally breathe again, like I could finally start living life on my own terms. "I want to focus on myself," I said, my voice filled with a newfound sense of determination. "I want to rediscover who I am, what I want out of life. I've spent so many years living in the shadow of Harold's lies, putting his needs and desires before my own. But now it's time for me to put myself first." Claire reached across the table, squeezing my hand in a gesture of support and understanding. "I think that's a wonderful idea, Mom. You deserve to be happy, to pursue your own dreams and passions." We spent the rest of the morning brainstorming ideas, dreaming up plans for the future. I talked about taking a painting class, something I had always wanted to do, but had never found the time for. Claire suggested we take a trip together, maybe to the beach or the mountains, somewhere we could relax and recharge. As we talked and laughed, I felt a sense of joy and contentment that I hadn't experienced in years. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be, surrounded by love and support, free from the chains of the past. Of course, I knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges and obstacles to overcome, moments of doubt and uncertainty. But with Claire by my side and a newfound sense of purpose in my heart, I knew that I could face whatever lay ahead with courage and resilience. In the days and weeks that followed, Claire and I threw ourselves into our new lives with gusto. We explored our new neighborhood, trying out local restaurants and shops, meeting new people, and making new friends. I signed up for that painting class, discovering a hidden talent and passion that I never knew I possessed. And through it all, we leaned on each other for support and encouragement, celebrating each other's successes and picking each other up when we stumbled. The bond between us had always been strong, but now it felt unbreakable, forged in the fires of adversity and tempered by the love and loyalty that had seen us through the darkest of times. As I looked around our cozy new home, filled with the laughter and warmth of my daughter, I felt a sense of gratitude and wonder wash over me. I had lost so much, endured so much pain and heartbreak, but in the end I had gained something far more precious. A second chance at life, an opportunity to start anew and build a future filled with joy, love, and purpose. And as the sun set on another day, casting a golden glow across the horizon, I knew that no matter what the future held, I would face it with my head held high and my heart full of hope. For the first time in my life, I was truly free, and that was a gift beyond measure. The familiar aroma of freshly baked bread wafted through the cozy bakery, a comforting scent that had greeted me every morning since childhood. As I stepped behind the counter to help my father, Jack, prepare for the day's rush, a pang of nostalgia tugged at my heart. This bakery, a cherished legacy passed down through generations, was more than just a business. It was a sanctuary, a place where the warmth of community and family intertwined. "Morning, sweetheart." Dad greeted me with a warm smile, his hands already dusted with flour from the early morning baking. "Ready for another busy day?" I nodded, tying my apron strings. "You know I am. The Harris Bakery wouldn't be the same without us." Dad chuckled, his eyes crinkling with pride. "Your mother would be so proud of you, Linda. She poured her heart into this place, and now it's our turn to keep her spirit alive." Memories of Mom's infectious laughter and her unwavering dedication to the bakery flooded my mind. Even after she passed away when I was just a teenager, her presence lingered in every nook and cranny, a constant reminder of the love and hard work that built this sanctuary. As the morning rush began, a steady stream of familiar faces filled the bakery, each greeted with a warm smile and a heartfelt exchange. Mrs. Thompson, the elderly widow from down the street, beamed as I handed her a freshly baked blueberry muffin, her favorite. Little Timmy, the rambunctious kid from the neighborhood, bounced excitedly as Dad slipped him an extra chocolate chip cookie, winking conspiratorially. These were the moments that made every early morning and late night worth it. The connections forged, the sense of belonging that transcended mere transactions. In a world that often felt cold and impersonal, our little bakery was a haven, a place where people could find solace in the simple pleasures of life. As the day wore on, my thoughts drifted to Mark, my husband of 2 years. We had met at the office where we both worked, and from the moment our eyes locked, I knew there was something special between us. His kind eyes and gentle demeanor had captured my heart, and I couldn't help but imagine a future filled with love and laughter by his side. Yet, even in the midst of our blissful union, a shadow loomed, the ever-present specter of Mark's mother, Evelyn. A woman of wealth and social standing, she had never approved of my humble roots or the bakery that meant so much to me. Her cutting remarks and disapproving glances had become a constant source of tension, driving a wedge between Mark and me. "Linda, if you truly loved me, you'd stand up to her." Mark's voice echoed in my mind, choked with frustration, his eyes pleading while my heart trembled between loyalty to my husband and fear of his mother's wrath. As the day drew to a close, and the last customer left with a warm pastry and a grateful smile, I found myself torn between the sanctuary of the bakery and the turmoil brewing in my personal life. But one thing was certain. I would not let Evelyn's disdain diminish the legacy my parents had built or the love that Mark and I shared. With a deep breath, I steeled my resolve, determined to find a way to bridge the divide and protect the things that mattered most. The sound of Evelyn's heels clicking against the hardwood floor announced her arrival before I even saw her. Mark tensed beside me, his hand gripping mine a little tighter as his mother swept into the living room, her perfectly coiffed hair and designer dress a stark contrast to our modest home. "Linda, darling." Evelyn greeted me with a forced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I hope you're not planning on wearing something so plain for the wedding." I swallowed hard, feeling the familiar prickle of insecurity creep up my spine. "It's just a simple ceremony, Evelyn, nothing too extravagant." Her perfectly arched eyebrow raised ever so slightly, and I could practically hear the disdain dripping from her words. "Surely you don't expect my son to settle for a backyard affair. This is a Bryant wedding, after all." Mark shifted uncomfortably beside me, but before he could speak, Evelyn continued, "I've taken the liberty of booking the country club for the reception. It's a venue befitting our family's stature." My heart sank as I realized she had once again steamrolled over our plans, imposing her vision without regard for our wishes. Mark remained silent, his gaze fixed on the floor, and I knew he wouldn't challenge his mother's decision. Evelyn's critical eye swept over our modest living room, her nose wrinkling ever so slightly. "I must say, Linda, I had hoped my son would have chosen a more suitable partner, one who could appreciate the finer things in life." Her words cut deep, striking at the very core of my insecurities. I had always taken pride in my humble upbringing and the values instilled by my father's bakery: hard work, community, and a deep appreciation for the simple pleasures in life. But in Evelyn's world, those virtues held no value. "Mother, that's enough." Mark finally spoke up, his voice strained, but Evelyn merely waved him off, her attention already shifting to the next item on her agenda. As she droned on about guest lists and seating arrangements, I felt myself retreating inward, my confidence withering under the weight of her constant criticism. Mark's hand remained limp in mine, a silent acknowledgement of his inability, or unwillingness, to stand up to his mother's overbearing presence. Later that evening, as Mark and I prepared for bed, the tension between us was palpable. I could see the conflict etched on his face, the struggle between his love for me and his deep-rooted fear of defying his mother's wishes. Linda, he began, his voice heavy with resignation, I know my mother can be difficult, but she means well in her own way. I fought back the bitter laugh that threatened to escape my lips. Evelyn's actions spoke louder than any well-intentioned words ever could. Her constant belittling, her disregard for our desires, and her relentless pursuit of social status had cast a dark shadow over what should have been one of the happiest times of our lives. Does she, Mark? I asked, my voice trembling with barely contained frustration. Because from where I'm standing, it seems like she's more concerned with appearances than our happiness. Mark's shoulders slumped, and I could see the internal battle raging within him. In that moment, I realized that no matter how much he loved me, a part of him would always be tethered to his mother's expectations, her approval a coveted prize he could never quite attain. As I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, a seed of resentment took root within me. Evelyn's constant undermining had not only threatened my self-worth, but had also driven a wedge between Mark and me. I knew then that I couldn't simply stand by and let her dictate the course of our lives. For the sake of our marriage and my own sense of dignity, I would have to find a way to confront her toxic influence, even if it meant risking the wrath of the formidable Evelyn Bryant. The sound of the doorbell echoed through the house, and I knew without even answering that it was Evelyn, her perfectly manicured nails rapping impatiently against the doorframe. Mark shot me an apologetic glance as he rose to greet his mother, his shoulders already tensing in anticipation of her critique. "Linda, darling," Evelyn breezed in, her gaze sweeping over our modest living room with thinly veiled disdain. "I simply had to come by and discuss the guest list for the wedding." Before I could respond, she thrust a thick binder into my hands, the pages overflowing with names and addresses. "I've taken the liberty of inviting a few of my dearest friends and associates. After all, this is a Bryant wedding, and we must maintain a certain level of decorum." My heart sank as I flipped through the pages, recognizing none of the names, a veritable who's who of Evelyn's elite social circle. Gone was any semblance of the intimate gathering Mark and I had envisioned, replaced by a grandiose affair designed to showcase Evelyn's status and connections. "Evelyn, I appreciate your input, but Mark and I had hoped for something a bit more personal," I began, my voice wavering slightly under her steely gaze. "Nonsense, dear," she waved her hand dismissively. "This is a once-in-a-lifetime event. We simply must do it properly." Mark shifted uncomfortably beside me, his silence a deafening testament to his unwillingness to challenge his mother's authority. I could feel the frustration building within me, a simmering resentment at the way Evelyn steamrolled over our wishes, treating our wedding as a mere extension of her own social ambitions. "But what about my family and friends?" I pressed on, my voice growing stronger. "Shouldn't they be included as well?" Evelyn's perfectly sculpted eyebrow arched ever so slightly, and I could practically hear the disdain dripping from her words. "Surely you don't expect to invite those common folk to such an esteemed occasion." The insult stung like a slap in the face, and I felt Mark tense beside me, his jaw clenching as he struggled to find the words to defend me. But before he could speak, Evelyn continued, her tone laced with condescension. "Darling, I'm only trying to ensure that this wedding reflects the Bryant family's standing in society. We can't have your little bakery friends cluttering up the guest list, now can we?" The air seemed to crackle with tension as her words hung between us, and I could feel the anger bubbling up within me, threatening to boil over. How dare she dismiss the very people who had been my rock, my support system, throughout my life? The loyal customers and cherished friends who had celebrated my triumphs and comforted me in my darkest moments, reduced to mere clutter in Evelyn's eyes. "That's enough, Mother," Mark finally spoke up, his voice strained but resolute. "Linda's family and friends are just as important as yours. This is our wedding, and we'll invite whoever we choose." Evelyn's eyes narrowed, her perfectly painted lips pursing in disapproval. "Mark, darling, you can't be serious. These people are beneath us, and their presence will only serve to diminish the grandeur of the occasion." The words hung in the air like a slap, and I could feel the anger and hurt radiating from Mark as he struggled to maintain his composure. In that moment, I realized the true depth of Evelyn's disdain, not just for me, but for everything and everyone that didn't conform to her elitist ideals. As Evelyn continued to prattle on about seating arrangements and floral arrangements, her voice droning on like a persistent buzz, I felt a newfound resolve taking root within me. This was supposed to be the happiest day of our lives, a celebration of love and commitment, but Evelyn had twisted it into a twisted display of social climbing and one-upmanship. I would not stand idly by and let her trample over our dreams, our values, any longer. If Mark couldn't find the strength to stand up to his mother, then I would have to take matters into my own hands. The seeds of a plan began to germinate in my mind, a silent vow to reclaim our wedding and our lives from Evelyn's toxic grip. The familiar chime of the bakery's bell greeted me as I stepped inside, the comforting aroma of freshly baked bread instantly calming my frayed nerves. As I made my way behind the counter, exchanging warm greetings with the regulars, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief wash over me. This was my sanctuary, a place where Evelyn's toxic influence held no sway. "Everything all right, sweetheart?" Dad's voice broke through my reverie, his brow furrowed with concern. "You seem a bit distracted today." I forced a smile, not wanting to burden him with the weight of my troubles. "Just wedding stress," I replied, hoping the half-truth would suffice. Dad's expression softened, and he reached out to give my hand a gentle squeeze. "Don't let that woman get you down, Linda. This is supposed to be a happy time for you and Mark." I nodded, swallowing the lump that had formed in my throat. If only he knew the extent of Evelyn's meddling, her relentless efforts to mold our wedding into a gaudy display of her own social standing. As the day wore on, and the familiar faces of our loyal customers streamed in and out, I found myself seeking solace in their warm smiles and friendly banter. These were the people who truly mattered, the ones who had been there for me through thick and thin, long before Evelyn's toxic presence had entered our lives. It was then that a seed of an idea began to take root in my mind. If Evelyn was determined to turn our wedding into a spectacle for her elite social circle, then perhaps it was time to remind her of the true power of community, the unbreakable bonds forged through shared experiences and unwavering support. That evening, as I closed up the bakery, I made a series of discreet phone calls, reaching out to those I knew I could trust implicitly. One by one, they agreed to meet me in secret, their voices brimming with concern and a shared determination to stand by my side. The following night, I found myself in the cozy living room of Mrs. Thompson, the elderly widow who had been a fixture at the bakery for as long as I could remember. Around me sat a small but formidable group, fellow customers, neighbors, and friends who had become like family over the years. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice trembling slightly with a mixture of nerves and resolve. As you know, Evelyn has been difficult, to say the least, when it comes to the wedding plans. A murmur of agreement rippled through the room, and I could see the shared frustration etched on their faces. They had all borne witness to Evelyn's disdain, her dismissive attitude toward the very community that had nurtured and supported me throughout my life. "She wants to turn our wedding into a gaudy display of wealth and status," I continued, my voice growing stronger. "But I won't let her diminish the love and support that you've all shown me over the years." Mrs. Thompson reached out and patted my hand, her eyes shining with determination. "We're with you, dear," she assured me. "That woman doesn't know the first thing about true family and community." One by one, they pledged their support, offering ideas and strategies to counter Evelyn's elitist machinations. From securing a prime location for the ceremony to rallying the local businesses to provide their services, a plan began to take shape. A plan to remind Evelyn that true strength lies not in wealth or social standing, but in the unbreakable bonds of community. As the meeting drew to a close, and I looked around at the faces of those who had become my chosen family, I felt a newfound sense of resolve. Evelyn might wield her wealth and influence like a weapon, but she had underestimated the power of genuine love and loyalty. The battle lines had been drawn, and I was determined to emerge victorious, not just for myself, but for the enduring spirit of community that had sustained me through every challenge life had thrown my way. The sound of Evelyn's shrill voice cut through the air like a knife, shattering the tentative peace that had settled over our weekly family dinner. Honestly, Linda, must you insist on serving such pedestrian fare? One would think you'd have learned a thing or two about proper hosting by now. I felt the familiar sting of her words, the disdain dripping from every syllable as she eyed the simple spread of homemade dishes before her. Dad's jaw clenched, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the edge of the table, but before he could respond, Evelyn continued her tirade. "And this bakery," she sneered, her gaze sweeping over the quaint decor that had once filled me with such pride. "Surely you don't expect my son to be associated with such a common establishment." The air seemed to crackle with tension, and I could feel Mark's discomfort radiating from beside me. He opened his mouth as if to defend me, but the words never came, a silent testament to the hold his mother still had over him. "That's enough, Evelyn," Dad's voice boomed, startling us all with its sudden ferocity. "This bakery has been a cornerstone of our community for generations, and I'll not have you disrespect it, or my daughter, under my own roof." Evelyn's perfectly sculpted eyebrows arched in surprise, her lips pursing into a thin line of disapproval. "Jack, darling, I'm merely trying to help Linda understand the expectations that come with being part of our family. Surely you can see how her humble beginnings might be a liability." The words hung in the air like a noxious cloud, and I could feel the anger and hurt radiating from Dad's every pore. This was more than just a petty insult. It was a direct attack on the very values and traditions that had sustained our family for generations. A liability? Dad's voice trembled with barely contained fury. "The only liability here is your complete lack of respect and decency. Linda is a kind, hard-working woman who embodies the true spirit of family and community, something you clearly know nothing about." Evelyn's eyes narrowed, her perfectly manicured nails drumming against the tabletop in a display of barely restrained irritation. "How dare you speak to me in such a manner? I am merely trying to guide Linda toward a more refined way of life." "Refined?" Dad scoffed, his laughter tinged with bitterness. "You call belittling and demeaning others refined? Your idea of refinement is nothing more than a hollow facade, a desperate attempt to cling to a false sense of superiority." The words seemed to hang in the air, a palpable silence descending over the room as Evelyn's face flushed with indignation. For a moment I thought she might storm out, her pride too wounded to endure such a scathing rebuke. But then her expression hardened and she turned her icy gaze towards me. "Linda, darling, surely you don't agree with this outburst." Her voice was sickly sweet, laced with a subtle threat. "You know how important it is to maintain a certain level of decorum, especially with our upcoming nuptials." I felt the weight of her expectation pressing down on me, the unspoken demand that I choose between my father and the woman who would soon be my mother-in-law. But as I looked into Dad's eyes, shining with a fierce determination to protect me, I knew there was no choice to be made. "Evelyn," I began, my voice steady despite the turmoil raging within me. "This bakery, this community, is a part of who I am, and if you can't respect that, then perhaps it's time you reevaluated your priorities." The words seemed to hang in the air, a silent challenge to the woman who had made it her mission to undermine and belittle everything I held dear. And in that moment, as Evelyn's face contorted with barely contained rage, I knew that the battle lines had been drawn. A silent vow to reclaim my dignity and protect the legacy that had sustained my family for generations. As the evening drew to a close and Evelyn swept out in a flurry of indignation, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. The seeds of revenge had taken root. A quiet determination to turn the tables on the woman who had tried so desperately to break me. And with the unwavering support of my father and my community, I knew that victory was within reach. The morning of our wedding dawned with a palpable tension in the air, like the calm before a storm. As I slipped into my simple yet elegant gown, I couldn't help but feel a sense of trepidation mingling with the excitement. Today was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, a celebration of love and commitment, but Evelyn's looming presence cast a dark shadow over the proceedings. As I stepped out of the bridal suite, I was greeted by a flurry of activity. Evelyn's elite friends milling about, their designer dresses and expensive jewelry a stark contrast to the warm, familiar faces of my own community. It was as if two worlds had collided, and I found myself caught in the middle, torn between the opulence Evelyn craved and the genuine love and support that had sustained me throughout my life. "Linda, darling, you look absolutely radiant," Evelyn gushed, sweeping over to me with a forced smile plastered on her perfectly made-up face. "Although perhaps we could have done something a bit more elaborate with your hair." I fought back the urge to roll my eyes, reminding myself that today was about more than just appeasing Evelyn's whims. This was my day, our day, and I would not let her dampen the joy and significance of the occasion. As the ceremony began, I felt a sense of calm wash over me, bolstered by the presence of my father and the familiar faces of our loyal customers and friends. These were the people who truly mattered, the ones who had been there for me through thick and thin, long before Evelyn's toxic influence had entered our lives. And then, as if sensing my newfound resolve, Dad took the stage, his eyes shining with a mixture of pride and determination. "Friends, family, we are gathered here today to celebrate the union of two remarkable individuals," he began, his voice ringing out with a clarity and strength that belied his years. "But more than that, we are here to honor the enduring spirit of community, the bonds that transcend mere bloodlines and social status, forged through shared experiences, unwavering support, and a deep appreciation for the simple joys in life." I could see Evelyn's perfectly sculpted eyebrows knit together in confusion, her lips pursing ever so slightly as Dad's words washed over her like a gentle rebuke. "Linda and Mark have chosen to embark on this journey together, not just as husband and wife, but as partners in a legacy that stretches back generations," Dad continued, his gaze sweeping over the assembled crowd. "A legacy built on the values of hard work, resilience, and an unwavering commitment to those who truly matter, the people who have stood by their side through good times and bad." As Dad's speech reached its crescendo, I felt a surge of pride and gratitude swell within me. This was more than just a wedding ceremony. It was a defiant declaration of the strength and resilience that had sustained my family and our community for generations, a powerful rebuke to Evelyn's shallow obsession with status and wealth. And as I turned to face Mark, his eyes shining with a newfound understanding and respect, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, bolstered by the love and support of those who truly mattered, and the unbreakable spirit of community that had brought us to this moment. The reception was in full swing, the air thick with the mingled scents of expensive perfumes and the familiar aroma of freshly baked treats from the Harris Bakery. As I made my way through the crowd, exchanging warm embraces and heartfelt congratulations, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and vindication wash over me. Despite Evelyn's best efforts to turn our wedding into a gaudy display of wealth and status, the genuine love and support of my community had shone through, overshadowing her hollow network of social climbers. Their presence was a tangible reminder of the true strength that lay in the bonds of family and community, bonds that transcended mere bloodlines and social standing. As I caught sight of Evelyn, her perfectly coiffed hair and designer dress, a stark contrast to the warmth and simplicity that surrounded her, I steeled myself for the inevitable confrontation. She had been uncharacteristically subdued during the ceremony, no doubt stung by Dad's powerful speech and the outpouring of affection from our guests. But I knew better than to expect her to retreat quietly into the night. Evelyn was a woman accustomed to getting her way, and she would not relinquish her grip on power and control without a fight. Sure enough, as I approached the head table, her eyes narrowed, and she rose to her feet, a hush falling over the room as she cleared her throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention for just a moment." I felt Mark tense beside me, his hand tightening around mine as we braced ourselves for the onslaught. "As many of you know, I have had my reservations about this union," Evelyn began, her voice dripping with disdain. "Not because I harbor any ill will toward Linda, of course, but because I fear she may not be suited for the lifestyle that comes with being part of our family." A murmur rippled through the crowd, and I could feel the eyes of my community members burning into Evelyn, their silent support bolstering my resolve. "You see, the Bryant name carries with it a certain level of prestige, a certain expectation," Evelyn continued, her gaze sweeping over the assembled guests. "And while I'm sure Linda's humble upbringing has instilled in her a certain set of values, one can't help but wonder if she truly understands the responsibilities that come with our station. The words hung in the air like a heavy fog, and I could feel the anger and hurt radiating from Dad's every pore. But before he could respond, before the fury that had been simmering within me could boil over, a voice rang out from the crowd, clear, strong, and unwavering. "With all due respect, Mrs. Bryant," Mrs. Thompson, the elderly widow who had been a fixture at the bakery for as long as I could remember, stepped forward, her eyes shining with a fierce determination. "It seems to me that you're the one who doesn't understand the true meaning of family and community." A hush fell over the room as Evelyn's perfectly sculpted eyebrows knit together in confusion, her lips pursing ever so slightly. "Linda may not have been born into your world of wealth and privilege," Mrs. Thompson continued, her voice carrying a weight and authority that belied her years. "But she has something far more valuable, a deep appreciation for the bonds that truly matter, the ones forged through shared experiences, unwavering support, and a genuine love for the simple joys in life." One by one, the other members of our community stepped forward, their voices rising in a chorus of support, each sharing their own stories and memories of the warmth and kindness that Linda had brought into their lives. As the testimonials washed over me, I felt a surge of pride and gratitude swell within my chest. These were the people who had stood by me through thick and thin, who had seen me not just as a customer or a neighbor, but as a cherished member of their extended family. And as I turned to face Mark, his eyes shining with a newfound understanding and respect, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, bolstered by the love and support of those who truly mattered and the unbreakable spirit of community that had brought us to this moment. "Mother," Mark's voice rang out, clear and resolute, cutting through the din of the crowd. "I love you, and I will always be grateful for the opportunities you've provided me. But Linda is my wife, my partner, and my future. And if you cannot accept and respect that, then I'm afraid our paths must diverge." A collective gasp rippled through the room as Mark's words sank in, and I could see the color drain from Evelyn's face, her carefully constructed facade crumbling before our very eyes. "From this day forward, I will be taking Linda's surname," Mark declared, his hand tightening around mine in a silent vow of solidarity. "And I will embrace the values and traditions that have sustained her family for generations, values that you, regrettably, seem to have lost sight of." In that moment, as Evelyn stood frozen in stunned silence, I felt a sense of liberation wash over me. The shackles of her toxic influence had been broken, and I was free to embrace the life I had always dreamed of. A life filled with love, laughter, and the unwavering support of a community that had become more than just neighbors, but a cherished extension of my family. The months following our wedding passed in a whirlwind of change and adjustment, but through it all, a sense of peace and contentment settled over our lives. With Evelyn's toxic influence finally banished, Mark and I were free to embrace the values and traditions that had sustained my family for generations. Gone were the days of walking on eggshells, constantly second-guessing ourselves to appease Evelyn's elitist whims. Instead, we found ourselves welcomed with open arms into the warm embrace of my community, their unwavering support and genuine affection a balm for the wounds inflicted by years of emotional turmoil. As we settled into our new life together, Mark threw himself wholeheartedly into the daily operations of the Harris Bakery, his natural affinity for numbers and business acumen proving invaluable as we explored ways to expand our reach and share our beloved treats with a wider audience. "You know, Linda," he mused one evening as we pored over the latest sales figures, a contented smile playing on his lips, "I never truly appreciated the magic of this place until now." I couldn't help but chuckle, remembering the disdain that had once clouded his perception, a byproduct of Evelyn's relentless pursuit of status and wealth. "Well, I'm just glad you finally saw the light." Mark's gaze softened, and he reached across the table to take my hand in his. "It's more than that," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "This bakery, this community, it's a living, breathing embodiment of everything that truly matters in life. Love, loyalty, and the simple joys that money can't buy." As the weeks turned into months, the news of Evelyn's public humiliation and Mark's defiant stance spread like wildfire through her elite social circles. One by one, her so-called friends and associates began to distance themselves, their shallow allegiances crumbling in the face of her tarnished reputation. Meanwhile, our little bakery thrived, buoyed by the unwavering support of our community and the influx of curious newcomers drawn in by the tantalizing aromas and the promise of a warm, welcoming atmosphere. Dad, ever the visionary, saw an opportunity to expand our reach even further, and with Mark's business savvy and my deep-rooted knowledge of the bakery's operations, we embarked on an ambitious plan to open a second location in the heart of the city. The grand opening was a true celebration of our journey, a testament to the resilience and determination that had carried us through the darkest of times. As the ribbon was cut and the doors swung open, a sea of familiar faces greeted us, their smiles and well wishes a poignant reminder of the unbreakable bonds that had sustained us. In the years that followed, our little bakery empire continued to grow, each new location a beacon of hope and community in a world that often felt cold and impersonal. And through it all, Mark and I remained steadfast in our commitment to the values that had brought us together: hard work, loyalty, and an unwavering appreciation for the simple pleasures in life. As I watched Dad play with our children in the warm, golden light of the bakery's kitchen, their laughter mingling with the familiar scents of freshly baked bread and sugary confections, I couldn't help but feel a profound sense of gratitude wash over me. This was the life I had always dreamed of, a life filled with love, laughter, and the unwavering support of a community that had become more than just neighbors, but a cherished extension of our family. And in those quiet moments as the world outside faded into the background, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, bolstered by the strength and resilience that had carried us through the darkest of times and the enduring spirit of community that had become the very foundation of our lives. The moment I stepped through the front door, my heart sank. There stood Edna, my mother-in-law, with her suitcases packed and a smug look on her face. I knew this day would come, but I never expected it to be so soon. "Naomi, your worthless existence is over. Neil doesn't need a useless wife who claims to work. From now on, I'll take care of my son," Edna declared, her voice dripping with disdain. I felt the anger rising within me. "This is my home too, and I work hard every day, Edna. You can't just—" She cut me off, thrusting a stack of papers into my hands. "Don't lie. Sign these papers and leave while I make this place worthy of my family." My eyes widened as I realized what I was holding. Divorce papers, supposedly signed by Neil. The betrayal stung like 1,000 needles, piercing my heart. How could he do this to me after all these years? I looked up at Edna, her eyes gleaming with triumph. She had always resented me, viewing me as an obstacle to her son's success. Now she had finally found a way to get rid of me, but I refused to let her see me crumble. With a steady hand, I signed the papers, my signature a declaration of my resolve. I would not let this defeat me. I would start anew, free from the toxicity that had plagued my life for far too long. As I gathered my belongings, memories of happier times flooded my mind. Neil and I had once been so in love, supporting each other's dreams and ambitions. He had encouraged my freelance writing career, and I had been his rock as he pursued his own passions. But somewhere along the way, things had changed. Neil's writing career stagnated, and he began to indulge his parents' delusions of grandeur. The loving husband I once knew had become a stranger, a mere puppet in his family's twisted play. I pushed the memories aside, focusing on the present. I had to find a new place to live, to rebuild my life on my own terms. It wouldn't be easy, but I knew I had the strength within me to overcome this challenge. As I stepped out of the house, I caught a glimpse of Edna's smug smile. She thought she had won, but little did she know that this was just the beginning of my journey. I would prove to her, to Neil, and to myself that I was more than just a useless wife. With each step, I felt a newfound sense of purpose. The road ahead was uncertain, but I was ready to face it head-on. I had spent too many years living in the shadows of others' expectations. Now, it was time for me to reclaim my life and find the happiness I deserved. As I walked away from the house that had once been my home, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of sadness. But I knew that this was not the end, but rather the start of a new chapter. A chapter where I would be the author of my own story, free from the chains of the past. With a deep breath, I stepped into the unknown, ready to embrace the challenges and triumphs that lay ahead. This was my time to shine, and nothing, not even Edna's cruelty or Neil's betrayal, could stop me now. As I settled into the driver's seat of my car, the weight of the past few hours crashed down on me. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles turning white as I fought back the tears that threatened to spill. How had it come to this? How had the love Neil and I once shared turned into such a bitter, twisted mess? Memories of our early days together flooded my mind. I remembered the way Neil's eyes sparkled when he talked about his writing, the passion in his voice as he shared his dreams with me. I had been his biggest supporter, encouraging him to pursue his craft while I worked tirelessly to build my own freelance career. We had been a team, a partnership built on love and mutual respect. But somewhere along the way, things had changed. Neil's writing career had stagnated, and he had become increasingly distant, spending more and more time trying to please his parents. I had tried to be understanding, to be supportive, but Edna's constant meddling and Neil's growing resentment had taken their toll. The once loving husband I knew had become a stranger, a shell of the man I had fallen in love with. As I drove through the familiar streets of our neighborhood, I couldn't help but wonder what had gone wrong. Had I not been enough? Had I not loved him enough, supported him enough? But deep down, I knew the truth. It wasn't about me. It was about Neil's inability to stand up to his parents, to assert himself, and fight for our marriage. He had chosen to indulge their delusions, to prioritize their expectations over our relationship. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I had to move on, to find a new place to live and start over. I couldn't continue to live in a house where I was constantly belittled and undermined, where my own husband had betrayed me so deeply. I pulled into the parking lot of a local coffee shop, needing a moment to gather my thoughts. As I sat there, sipping on a steaming cup of coffee, I felt a newfound sense of determination wash over me. I would not let this defeat me. I would rise above the pain and the betrayal, and I would build a new life for myself. I pulled out my phone and started searching for apartments in the area. It wouldn't be easy, starting over at my age, but I knew I had the strength within me to do it. I had spent too many years living in the shadows of others' expectations. It was time for me to step into the light and reclaim my life. As I scrolled through the listings, a sense of excitement began to build within me. This was my chance to start fresh, to create a home that was truly my own, a place where I could be myself, free from the constant judgment and criticism of my in-laws. I knew there would be challenges ahead. I would have to face the reality of Neil's betrayal and the disdain of his family. But I was ready. I had spent too many years silently enduring their abuse, and I refused to do it any longer. With a newfound sense of purpose, I finished my coffee and headed back to the car. I had a lot of work ahead of me, but I was ready to face it head on. This was my time to shine, to prove to myself and to the world that I was more than just a useless wife. As I drove away from the coffee shop, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. I was ready to embrace the challenges and triumphs that lay ahead, to write the next chapter of my life on my own terms. The days following my departure from the house I once called home were a whirlwind of emotions. I threw myself into my work, determined to prove to myself and everyone else that I was more than just a useless wife. But even as I poured my heart and soul into my freelance projects, I couldn't escape the constant barrage of insults and passive-aggressive behavior from Edna and Neil. Every family gathering became a battlefield, with Edna taking every opportunity to publicly humiliate me. She would make snide comments about my work, my appearance, and my supposed lack of contribution to the family. Neil, ever the dutiful son, would sit silently by, never once coming to my defense. I remember one particularly painful incident at a family dinner. Edna had invited everyone over to celebrate Neil's supposed writing success, and I had reluctantly agreed to attend. As we sat around the table, Edna began to regale the family with tales of Neil's literary prowess, painting him as a rising star in the publishing world. I knew it was all a lie, but I bit my tongue, not wanting to cause a scene. But Edna wasn't content to simply praise her son. She turned to me, a cruel smile playing on her lips, and said, "And what about you, Naomi? What have you accomplished lately? Still playing at being a writer?" The table fell silent, and I felt all eyes on me. I wanted to scream, to tell them all the truth about Neil's failures and Edna's manipulation, but I remained stoically silent, refusing to give her the satisfaction of seeing me break. Instead, I excused myself from the table and stepped outside, taking deep breaths to calm my racing heart. It was in that moment that I realized I couldn't continue to live this way. I had to leave, to find a way out of this toxic environment before it destroyed me completely. Later that evening, I found myself confiding in my daughter, Clara. She had always been my rock, my confidante, and I knew I could trust her with my deepest fears and doubts. As we sat together on the couch, I poured out my heart to her, telling her about the constant insults, the passive-aggressive behavior, and the suffocating control Edna had over our lives. Clara listened patiently, her eyes filled with concern and love. When I finished, she took my hand in hers and said, "Mom, you deserve so much better than this. You are a strong, talented, and amazing woman, and you don't need to put up with their abuse any longer." Her words hit me like a lightning bolt, and I felt a sudden surge of clarity wash over me. She was right. I had spent too many years silently enduring their mistreatment, and it was time for me to take a stand. I had to value myself, to recognize my own worth, and to prepare for a life without Neil and his toxic family. With Clara's encouragement ringing in my ears, I began to make plans. I started secretly searching for apartments, determined to find a place where I could start fresh and rebuild my life on my own terms. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to face the challenges head-on. As I lay in bed that night, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. For the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about the future. I knew that leaving Neil and his family would be painful, but I also knew that it was necessary. I had to prioritize my own well-being, to reclaim the respect and autonomy that had been stripped away from me for so long. With a newfound sense of purpose, I closed my eyes and drifted off to sleep, dreaming of a future where I was free from the chains of my past, ready to embrace the possibilities that lay ahead. With newfound determination, I began to put my plan into action. I started covertly searching for apartments, scouring online listings, and making discreet calls to potential landlords. I knew I had to be careful, as any hint of my intentions would surely be met with swift retribution from Edna and Neil. As I searched, I also began to discreetly pack my belongings. I started with small, inconspicuous items. A few books here, a piece of jewelry there. I tucked them away in hidden corners of the house, slowly building a secret stash of my most treasured possessions. But even as I worked towards my escape, the tension at home continued to escalate. Neil, ever the dutiful son, seemed to be under increasing pressure from his parents to maintain the illusion of his success. He began to siphon money from our joint accounts, claiming it was for shared expenses, but I knew better. I remember one particularly heated argument we had over finances. I had confronted him about the missing money, demanding to know where it had gone. He had the audacity to look me in the eye and lie, claiming it was for a business investment that would pay off tenfold. I saw right through his deceit, and I felt a surge of anger course through my veins. How dare he continue to manipulate and deceive me, even as I was planning my escape from this toxic environment? But I refused to let my anger consume me. Instead, I channeled it into a quiet, steely resolve. I would not let Neil or his family break me. I would regain the respect and autonomy that had been stripped away from me, no matter the cost. As the days turned into weeks, I continued to search for my new home in secret. I attended apartment viewings under the guise of running errands, always careful to cover my tracks. I knew that if Edna or Neil caught wind of my plans, they would stop at nothing to keep me under their control. Finally, after weeks of searching, I found the perfect place. It was a small, cozy apartment in a quiet neighborhood, far from the suffocating influence of my in-laws. I signed the lease with a sense of triumph, knowing that I was one step closer to my freedom. But even as I celebrated this small victory, I knew that the hardest part was yet to come. I had to find a way to leave without triggering a prolonged fight with Edna and Neil. I knew they would not let me go easily, and I had to be strategic in my departure. That's when fate seemed to intervene. Edna, in her never-ending quest to control every aspect of our lives, began to pressure me to sign the divorce papers once again. She cornered me one evening, thrusting the papers in my face and demanding that I end this farce of a marriage once and for all. In that moment, I saw my opportunity. I agreed to sign the papers, but on one condition, that I be allowed to leave immediately, without any further interference from her or Neil. Edna, so eager to be rid of me, readily agreed. And so, with a sense of both relief and trepidation, I signed my name on the dotted line. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, knowing that I was finally free from the legal bonds that had tied me to Neil and his family for so long. But even as I celebrated this small victory, I knew that the real challenge lay ahead. I had to gather my belongings and make my escape before Edna or Neil could change their minds. I had to be strong, to rely on the quiet strength that had sustained me through all these years of silent battles. With a deep breath, I began to pack my bags, ready to embark on the next chapter of my life. A chapter filled with uncertainty, yes, but also with the promise of a brighter future, free from the chains of my past. The day I moved into my new apartment was a day I will never forget. As I stepped over the threshold, a wave of relief washed over me, so powerful that it nearly brought me to my knees. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe again, like the weight of the world had been lifted from my shoulders. I took a moment to simply stand there, taking in my new surroundings. The apartment was small, but it was mine. Every inch of it represented a new beginning, a chance to start over and rebuild my life on my own terms. As I began to unpack my belongings, I felt a newfound burst of creativity coursing through my veins. Ideas for new writing projects flooded my mind, and I found myself itching to sit down at my desk and put pen to paper. It was as if the act of leaving behind the toxic environment of my old life had unlocked something within me, something that had been dormant for far too long. Over the next few days, I threw myself into my work with a passion I hadn't felt in years. I wrote for hours on end, pouring my heart and soul into every word. I took breaks only to eat, sleep, and occasionally chat with my new neighbor, Grace, who had quickly become a source of support and friendship. Grace was a kind, empathetic woman who seemed to understand the struggles I was going through without me even having to say a word. She would often invite me over for tea and conversation, and I found myself opening up to her in ways I never had with anyone before. As I settled into my new life, I began to rediscover the joy of living independently. I relished the freedom to make my own choices, to come and go as I pleased without fear of judgment or criticism. I took long walks in the park, explored new cafes and bookstores, and even started attending a weekly writing group at the local library. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was truly living, rather than simply existing. I was no longer defined by my role as Neil's wife or Edna's punching bag. I was Naomi, a strong, capable woman with a bright future ahead of her. But even as I reveled in my newfound independence, I couldn't shake the feeling that the other shoe was about to drop. I had spent so many years living under the oppressive thumb of my in-laws that a part of me was still waiting for them to come barging back into my life, demanding that I return to my old ways. And then, 3 days into my fresh start, the phone rang. I picked it up, expecting it to be Clara, or perhaps a new client. But the voice on the other end of the line made my blood run cold. It was Neil, and he was in a panic. He spoke rapidly, his words tumbling over each other in a frantic jumble. From what I could gather, his family was in the midst of a financial crisis, and the carefully crafted facade of his success had come crashing down around them. I listened in stunned silence as he begged me to come back, to help him pick up the pieces of the life he had so carelessly shattered. But even as a part of me ached for the man I had once loved, I knew that I could never go back to that life. I had worked too hard, come too far, to let myself be dragged back into the darkness. With a heavy heart, I told Neil that I couldn't help him, that he needed to face the consequences of his actions on his own. And then, with a sense of finality, I hung up the phone, severing the last tie to my old life. As I sat there in the silence of my new apartment, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I knew that the road ahead would not be easy, but I also knew that I had the strength within me to face whatever challenges lay ahead. I was ready to embrace my new life, to chase my dreams, and build a future filled with love, laughter, and endless possibility. The days following Neil's frantic phone call were a whirlwind of emotions. I tried to focus on my work, to lose myself in the joy of writing and the comfort of my new life, but his words kept echoing in my mind, refusing to be silenced. It wasn't until a week later that I learned the full extent of the crisis that had befallen my former family. Grace, my ever-vigilant neighbor, had heard through the grapevine that Neil's parents had lost everything. They had quit their jobs, believing in the fiction of their son's success, and now found themselves destitute and desperate. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of sympathy for them, despite all the pain they had caused me over the years. To have your entire world come crashing down around you, to realize that the life you had built was nothing more than a house of cards. I couldn't imagine the devastation they must have felt. But even as I grappled with these conflicting emotions, the phone calls from Neil continued. Each time, his voice grew more desperate, more unhinged. He begged me to come back, to help him pick up the pieces of the life he had so carelessly shattered. Naomi, they think I'm a successful writer, he pleaded, his voice cracking with emotion. They won't stop until you come back. I felt my resolve wavering, the old habits of a lifetime threatening to pull me back into the darkness. But then I remembered all the pain and humiliation I had endured at the hands of Neil and his family, all the years I had spent silently suffering under their oppressive rule. I won't be part of your lies anymore, I said firmly, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. You need to face the consequences of your actions. There was a long silence on the other end of the line, broken only by the sound of Neil's ragged breathing. And then, with a click, the call disconnected, leaving me alone with my thoughts once more. In the days that followed, I threw myself into my work with renewed vigor. I wrote like a woman possessed, pouring all of my pain and anger and hope onto the page. I attended writing workshops and networking events, determined to build a new life for myself, one that was entirely my own. And slowly but surely I began to heal. The wounds of the past would always be with me, but they no longer defined me. I was no longer Naomi the victim, Naomi the punching bag. I was Naomi the survivor, Naomi the thriver. But even as I embraced this new chapter of my life, I couldn't help but wonder about Neil and his family. What had become of them in the wake of their own destruction? Had they found a way to pick up the pieces, to start anew? It wasn't until months later that I learned the truth. Grace, ever the gossip, had heard through a friend of a friend that Neil and his parents had moved into a small, run-down apartment on the outskirts of town. They were barely scraping by, their once proud lives reduced to a shambles. I felt a strange sense of vindication at the news, a quiet satisfaction in knowing that they were finally facing the consequences of their actions. But even as I reveled in this small victory, I knew that I could never truly take pleasure in their downfall. For me, the true revenge was in living well, in building a life that was entirely my own. And so, with a sense of peace and purpose, I cut off all ties to my old life, embracing the freedom and independence that I had fought so hard to achieve. As I sat at my desk, surrounded by the trappings of my new life, I felt a sense of pride and accomplishment wash over me. I had confronted the demons of my past and emerged stronger, more resilient than ever before. And now, with the world at my feet and the future stretching out before me, I knew that anything was possible. As the months passed, I settled into my new life with a sense of peace and contentment that I hadn't felt in years. My writing flourished, and I found myself surrounded by a growing circle of friends and colleagues who appreciated me for who I was, rather than what I could do for them. But even as I reveled in my newfound freedom, I couldn't help but wonder about Neil and his family. What had become of them in the wake of their own destruction? Had they found a way to rebuild their lives, or were they still struggling to pick up the pieces? It wasn't until I ran into Grace at the local market that I finally got some answers. She pulled me aside, her eyes wide with a mix of excitement and disbelief. "You'll never guess what I heard," she whispered conspiratorially. "Apparently, Neil and his parents have moved into a tiny apartment on the other side of town. They're barely scraping by, and the whole neighborhood is talking about it. I felt a strange sense of vindication wash over me, a quiet satisfaction in knowing that they were finally facing the consequences of their actions. But even as I processed this news, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of sympathy for them. I heard that Edna and Tom are constantly fighting, Grace continued, her voice lowering even further. And Neil, well, let's just say he's not handling the pressure very well. I nodded, unsurprised by this revelation. Neil had always been weak-willed, easily swayed by the opinions of others. It was no wonder that he was struggling to cope with the weight of his own lies. Over the next few weeks, I found myself thinking more and more about my former family. I couldn't help but wonder what they were going through, how they were coping with the reality of their own downfall. But even as I grappled with these conflicting emotions, I knew that I couldn't let myself get pulled back into their toxic orbit. I had worked too hard, come too far to let them drag me back down into the darkness. And so, with a sense of resolve, I made a conscious decision to focus on my own future, to pour all of my energy into building the life that I had always dreamed of. I threw myself into my writing, attending workshops and conferences, networking with other professionals in my field. Slowly but surely, my hard work began to pay off. My freelance business took off, and I found myself inundated with new clients and projects. I even started to gain recognition in my field, with my work being featured in prominent publications and online forums. But even as I celebrated these successes, I never lost sight of the lessons I had learned from my past. I knew that true happiness and fulfillment came not from external validation, but from a deep sense of self-worth and purpose. And so I continued to focus on my own growth and development, both personally and professionally. I traveled, explored new hobbies and interests, and surrounded myself with people who lifted me up and supported my dreams. As the years passed, I found myself looking back on my journey with a sense of pride and accomplishment. I had faced some of the darkest moments of my life, but I had emerged stronger, more resilient than ever before. And while I knew that I would never forget the pain and betrayal of my past, I also knew that I had found a way to move forward, to build a life that was entirely my own. In the end, that was the true vindication, not in seeing Neil and his family suffer, but in knowing that I had triumphed over adversity, that I had found the strength and courage to create a future filled with love, laughter, and endless possibility. And as I looked out over the horizon, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, I would face them with the same resilience and determination that had brought me this far. For I was Naomi, a survivor, a thriver, and nothing could stop me now. As the years passed, I found myself reflecting more and more on the journey that had brought me to this point. It had been a long and difficult road, filled with pain and heartache, but also with moments of incredible joy and self-discovery. I thought back to those early days when I had first met Neil and fallen head over heels in love. We had been so young then, so full of hope and promise. I had truly believed that we would spend the rest of our lives together, building a future filled with love and laughter. But life had a way of throwing curveballs, and our marriage had slowly crumbled under the weight of Neil's lies and his family's toxic influence. I had spent years silently enduring their abuse, convinced that I was somehow to blame for their behavior. It wasn't until I found the strength to leave, to strike out on my own, and build a new life, that I realized just how much I had been holding myself back. Freed from the chains of my past, I had flourished in ways I never thought possible. My writing career had taken off, and I found myself in demand as a freelance editor and consultant. I traveled the world, exploring new cultures and immersing myself in the beauty and diversity of life. But even as I celebrated these successes, I never lost sight of what truly mattered. My daughter, Clara, remained my rock, my constant source of love and support. And as she built her own family, I found myself cherishing every moment I could spend with her and my grandchildren. It was during one of these visits that I found myself reflecting on the true meaning of resilience. Clara and I were sitting in her backyard, watching her children play on the grass. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over everything, and I felt a sense of peace wash over me. You know, Mom, Clara said softly, turning to me with a smile. I've been thinking a lot about everything you've been through, and I just wanted to say how proud I am of you. I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes, and I reached out to take her hand in mine. Thank you, sweetheart, I said, my voice thick with emotion. But I couldn't have done it without you. You've been my strength, my guiding light through all of this. Clara squeezed my hand, her eyes shining with love and admiration. You give me too much credit, she said with a laugh. You're the one who had the courage to leave, to start over and build a new life. That takes a special kind of strength, Mom. A strength that I hope I can pass on to my own children. I nodded, feeling a sense of pride swell in my chest. Clara was right. I had faced some of the darkest moments of my life, but I had emerged stronger, more resilient than ever before. And that was a legacy worth passing on, a gift that I could give to my grandchildren and all the generations to come. As the sun dipped below the horizon and the stars began to twinkle in the sky, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I knew that there would be more challenges ahead, more obstacles to overcome. But I also knew that I had the strength within me to face them head-on, to keep moving forward no matter what life threw my way. And so as I sat there in the twilight, surrounded by the love and laughter of my family, I made a silent promise to myself. I would continue to live my life with resilience and self-worth, cherishing my autonomy and independence. I would be a role model for my grandchildren, showing them that it was never too late to start over, to build a life filled with purpose and meaning. For I was Naomi, a survivor, a thriver, and nothing could stop me now. I had conquered the trials of my past, and I was ready to embrace a future filled with endless possibility, anchored by the unshakable strength of my own resilience.